All right. Good evening to the February 25th FIC meeting. Pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
How's everybody doing? All good? All right. So, has everyone had a chance to review the minutes that Ron sent out on the February 13th meeting? I have power skimmed them at best with my work schedule, so I really can't answer to a lot of that.
Do you want feedback?
Yeah, I think, so we would be here and voting on the feedback. The one thing that I did mention, that I did see, Ron, is the stuff about the emails, conflict of interest, and what was mentioned at the school board meeting. I think that needs to come out because that was a school board meeting. That was not an FIC meeting of where those details were discussed.
No, because I read it here.
You read the email here, but the details that then followed at last week's school board meeting, with the continuation of that, was at the school board and not at the FIC. If your intention is to say we're not including that stuff.
You mean the line that says it was agreed that any further action related to potential conflict of interest stated by Mr. Cutler would be the responsibility of the school board and not the FIC?
It was the line of, it was noted by representatives of the school board that the school board members had not been consulted prior to Mr. Cutter sending the email. That was discussed at the school board meeting. And Mr. O'Blennis noted that Mr. Cutter signed it as the chair of the school board, indicating the email was at the direction of the school board. That stuff was mentioned at the school board meeting.
All right, let's see. Which paragraph are you in?
Third paragraph under email from Andrew Cutter to Ronald Linus.
What are you objecting to again? I'm sorry.
The first two sentences of that paragraph. It was noted by the representatives of the school board that school board members had not been consulted.
No, the school board members here said it.
Oh, so that was your reference to the school board members?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe change the word from members to representatives, or representative members?
No, they're school board members.
How about by
No, but to delineate that you're talking about
Okay.
the ones specifically in the room as opposed to all members.
Right.
No,
Because-
it says it was noted by
FIC school board members.
representatives of the school board.
At the FIC meeting.
All right, I was just at the FIC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
At
Just
this-
something to indicate where it was said.
At this meeting.
Yep.
Okay. Yep, that's fine. I got it.
That was the one thing that I was able to notice real quick.
Okay.
Well, I gotta let Joe into the meeting. Sorry, Joe. No, it's not.
Hello, Mr. Bob. I'm fine, how are you?
Is there any other, I guess, further discussion on the comments?
I have a few.
Are you able to?
He's not coming up for me to admit. I was able to admit everybody else, including the fire station.
Then I don't know that.
I would say if you guys want to go, I'll email Joe.
Okay, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I've noticed a subtle trend in the meeting notes. The discussions of options that cost the least are included in detail in the meeting notes. Those that they include the name of the person who brought up the issue, and significant details are included. Ideas that potentially cost more are noted briefly with no names associated with them. I specifically mentioned my concern that actively aiming to do just under the threshold, one would have to bring up GMS to code, should not be our goal. That we should be trying to bring the structure up to code, not actively trying to avoid doing this. That concern is not in the notes. Joe J. also gave a very heartfelt opinion that the educational concerns should be in the forefront of everything we do.
I'm sorry, are you reading?
I'm reading my own notes.
So one thing we could do is, after the notes go out, email the chair with the comments, because that way it gives him time to process them, and then you can bring forward amended notes. Because otherwise scribing what people are reading at him will probably be challenging.
This is more of a general trend
Well,
than
again,
specific.
I'm not getting into that, I'm just saying that if there are comments, then a good practice would be to email back.
The difficulty, I'm sensitive to what you're saying, is I am trying to not say, you can't get into, you can't make minutes that says Denise said this, and Ron said this, and Matt said that, because you might as well just do a transcript then. I
But
tried to,
There is a distinct difference. And it may be subtle for some of us, and may be unnoticeable to others, but it's
And-
the official record.
simply just provide what you want to add it in there, and we can see if we can make it make sense.
And lastly, it was noted when you wrote the first motion that it was stated that in addition to GMS would not seem logical, given the capacity that exists at CHS. My recollection of this is that the issue was brought up, but that was also not supported by many committee members, nor was it ever voted on.
I'm sorry, say that again, please?
Under your first motion,
Yes.
you state that in addition to GMS would not seem logical, given the capacity that exists at CHS.
I'm sorry, where exactly are you reading?
Look under your
Okay,
first,
so just, when you say something, tell me it's the first paragraph after the motion. Okay, now I'm ready. I mean, that's what it was stated, there was discussion to that effect.
there was discussion, but it was not a given, and many people objected. As many people objected as agreed upon your statement.
Okay. Send me what you want to change it to, if you'd like. In fact, I'll just take the line out.
That'd be great.
Okay?
Yeah, so I think, I'll say if there is time between the meetings come out, when the meeting minutes come out and the next meeting, if everyone can review and, or at least I can have a running list of what to look at. To Ron's point, we can't go Denise said, Matt said, or whatever, but the high level bullet points. But I do hear what you're saying on.
If you read them in a little more detail.
Yep, I agree, and that's why we go around and vote on them.
I think if you're going to have us send them around, you really have to CC everyone. Because we all hear what people are saying.
You have to be
Yeah.
careful on that though, because otherwise you begin an unofficial
Well-
offline meeting.
That's why I didn't do
Yeah,
it
Yeah,
ahead
yeah.
of time.
Basically, they should go to the chair and the chair can funnel them, or just say, please do not respond, and then,
Okay,
yeah, these are my comments, this is not to initiate a conversation, move on.
Yeah, if you want to make comments, send it to Dan,
that works.
and he can send it to me. I will, in fact, he and I can have a conversation of, what's your interpretation. I'll make an edit, I'll send it back to you, and see if you think they incorporate the comments.
All right, so minute comments to be sent to chairs. Will meet with minute note taker. I'm just leaving it as general in case that changes around later. That works. All right. 10 minutes early. All right. So, do we want to recap? We talked about what was mentioned at the school board, specifically in regards to we requested to do it now or for the new school board administration
Do what?
to revamp or reword our governance to the FIC to be voted on by the school board.
I think it wasn't like we need it by next meeting thing.
Yeah.
I understand that we have more pressing things to do, but we can just give a quick overview of that. So, the school board at our last meeting ended up having a discussion about governance and the fact that as a committee, we are supposed to be appointed by the school board, and we the only person that was actually appointed was Ron. for community members. So the school board does want to go back through and formally appoint committee members, because that's the way that it should be done. And then they wanted us to particularly address, since we created our own governance rules, they wanted us to address the issue that Ron had brought up regarding, or I guess not Ron had brought up, but had come about as a result of Andrew's email to Ron that turned into a discussion about what happens if a community member ends up on a board, or someone who's sitting here on behalf of a board and is not reelected or doesn't run again and wants to continue as a community member. Because it just wasn't something that we had really discussed as a committee. We got valuable time with respect to the
Yeah. In the video if it was urgent or not, but I just figured everyone should prepare that we gotta go through and do that, at some
It
point.
shouldn't be a super heavy lift, I don't think.
No, I don't think it'll be a super heavy lift. The only thing from the school board,
Can I make a suggestion? Based, I listened to that twice. I think should be the school board's responsibility to go and edit that the way they want it. Because at this point, it's not the FIC that's addressing that type of issue. I think it should be the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine, I can bring that back and.
I mean, that'd be my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can solve it in a very simple way, right? Like you just have to detail what the committee is made up of, right? It's made up of 5 community members, 1 board of selectmen person, 1 person from budget committee, 2 school board members, and then staff from the schools. And then that way, if the board of selectmen person, the budget person changes,
I think
that person doesn't stay on, like, if you left, you don't stay here, whoever replaces you takes your spot.
I think we just need to specify that community members, if the school wanted to go that way, community members are not also elected to other boards. Because that's where the conflict, the concern came up.
Or certain boards.
Sure,
So I was just say certain boards that have official representation.
but I know it's come up in the past, I don't know that anyone's actually officially documented it. There was a concern about one of our members wanting to be on a board of selectmen meeting committee, and that was put down, and then other school board ones. So it actually is fairly common, I just don't think anybody's actually written it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta set up your committee makeup.
So, yeah, but if the board, it's school board, it is a school board subcommittee, so it's simply handled, like, community members may not also be serving on other boards within town.
I would,
Unless, of course, you're rec.
well,
You're,
I'd ask
like,
Chairman
Well,
Leary,
Then
Do
you
you know-
need to get into specifics.
does the select board have any guidance? Because the select board would be the other board in the town that has subcommittees, and do you have any guidance or guiding documents or bylaws or?
Every group has their own bylaws. The budget committee has their own.
No,
Yeah,
but-
no, but I mean for selectmen, like, do you from the selectmen have any guidance on how you appoint to rec commission if you're also on, anything that guides your appointments? Okay.
So the school board votes at the budget committee, the select board puts somebody that votes at the budget committee. The only one that doesn't allow you to vote is the
I was
budget.
denied.
Yeah. No, I mean,
The board was denied.
when they are making, do they have guiding documents for
Because I
when
was
they're
also
making
rec-
appointments
also
to?
the rep,
Yeah.
so
Who's gonna be
the
on
arts
conservation
are.
commission, who's gonna be rec?
so,
So I'll bring it back, I'll bring it
Yeah.
back to the school board, I don't think it's like massive overhaul of anything, I think it's like a couple lines.
If
Remember,
anyone,
when we started this, we had like 25 people show up,
right,
right? And the committee has sort of whittled down, so we probably need to get to the point where we say, okay, it's gonna be comprised of X number of members, pick a number, like you said, from the different committees
Right.
and from the SAUs.
Do
Right.
you have
And
an
I think-
overabundance of people trying to get on this committee?
at first.
Well, we did, at the beginning, we
Yeah, but
did,
you
we had a
took
bunch.
everyone. At this point in time,
Right,
is
we took
anyone-
everyone, but
No,
not
I think-
everyone's here.
I think one thing that like could be something is like, if you were here, like Carrie's here as a member of the budget committee. And
it's voting
she
power.
loves this committee, so I know like if she were not on the budget committee anymore, she would wanna continue.
Without a doubt.
So we wanna
You
provide.
know it, I would.
But you would have to
just-
continue as a
I'd have to spend.
As
community
Right,
representative,
that's-
and then
that's
somebody
something-
new from the budget committee would come in and take that seat.
Right.
Correct, and that's
Yeah.
something that we need to just address, so we
Yep.
can, but I think it's a
But
good
it
point.
it was
We can
also
just bring it
talking
back.
about
think one
term
thing-
limits and this and that.
Oh, there's-
Yeah, and schedule and offsetting and all of that stuff. I
I think-
think
one thing you need to take into consideration, no disrespect, is you invited the selectmen to send a representative with the voting, and he also votes on the budget committee.
Yeah, but he doesn't-
Different set of rules, he's a selectman.
But I also think in those things we detail
The budget
who
committee
has
took their
voting
vote away.
power. And I thought we
Yeah.
did some of that
But the
already.
committee doesn't vote.
Did.
Point being is you have a situation where some, no, I'm not singling you out.
Three
You
vote
have-
bubble?
You have that already. Exactly
But
what
it's
you're
not, a
trying to.
vote. What we're really talking about is just voting rights,
Right.
Well,
ultimately.
he has vote.
He doesn't,
He votes for
He
the board of
votes-
selectmen.
he's voting for the Board of Selectmen though.
It's not, his vote is not a budget, straight up budget committee vote though.
Right.
He represents he's voting in the capacity of a board of selectmen.
Just like a school board representative is voting on behalf of the school board, not necessarily their personal.
Well, therefore, if somebody was on the budget committee and was acting as a citizen representative, they'd be voting as a citizen representative, not the budget committee.
But if they're on that committee, then the optics and the purview of that is that they cannot separate themselves from the two.
Well, the interesting point about that is, remember, this committee makes recommendations to the school board.
Yep.
So whatever's voted here, a representative that votes here is not voting on what will come before the budget committee.
I'll raise that point. I understand where you're coming from with that, so I'll raise that point at the school board as well. 'Cause that's also another thing that we hadn't really, like, looked
But
at.
I will tell you, the budget committee had a lengthy meeting about the only way we would send somebody here was without a vote.
And I appreciate that, because you are the representative of the budget committee. You are here at the behest of the budget committee.
Right,
That is very different than a citizen
sure,
being on the committee and voting and speaking as a citizen.
but the Joe voter doesn't necessarily know that. They know you as a budget committee member speaking out. So it has to do more with optics and perception than it has to do with your personal integrity. It's the optics of the situation. And I'm gonna tell you, it's been long standing, I mean, I understand where you're coming from and I hear your argument, but there's been lots of precedent in town where this has happened. It's not a special thing. It's not just because nobody, certain people don't like you. It's just, I'm sure everybody here loves you. But it's a matter of, this is the way it's been done. And in order to maintain transparency and optics and full-fledged, the trust of the voters.
Remember, I'm serving at the behest of
Sure.
the school board now, and they make that determination.
Yeah.
I think the optic is potentially the other way, is all of a sudden we get to a point where, okay, now we're, the rubber meets the road, and you kick off the person that has been most involved in this.
Well,
Well,
no one's kicking, no one's kicking.
No,
I have issues
I'm
with
saying if you
that
put in
comment.
if you respond the way Andrew, if I'm elected to the budget committee, and you choose to say, no, you can't serve, what's the optics of that?
So it's not that you can't serve, you can't have voting power.
What's the difference?
The fact that we've got all of the
You bring your
school
knowledge
administrators here. with-
Experience and voice and all those other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
And to be
honestly,
fair, this is like the 5th iteration of this committee. While I appreciate that you're this one, I was on 2 before this. This isn't a new committee. I had voting rights
I know.
then, and I no longer have voting rights.
But there's never been a makeup of the committee, as you know, that had anywhere beyond, if it had even one, member that large
We had 15 people at the first budget committee, at the first facilities committee.
of this one.
Yep. No, not this particular iteration, but one of the first iterations, there were 15 people in the room.
But if you look at the last Facilities Improvement Committee that recommended the last new school,
Right, because
there's that many.
the school board at the time decided not to include community members.
Right, so I mean,
Probably because the community members prior to that didn't go their way. So it's a matter of
my
perception.
understanding was that there was no one that came forward to participate.
Oh, no, there were. I asked specifically to have a community member because the budget committee wasn't sending anybody. And then we were told by a certain elected representative that they weren't interested in community involvement. So it was a former
enough.
school board
We're all-
board choice.
We're all here now.
So, but I'm saying, yes, but I'm saying that it
Yeah.
wasn't a choice because it wasn't an option. Previous ones had them, so this is not a unique experience.
I'll bring this, Peter and I will bring this all back to the school board and
I appreciate
we can
that.
address that.
Yeah, I think it's fair that if the school board is looking for us to change the governance, then they should get first crack at what they wanna see changed, or
Yeah.
at least detail out a bullet list to us.
I mean, ultimately, since it's school board.
And can I add one last note?
Yeah.
It was recognized at your school board meeting that Andrew's intention was as a communication email.
Yeah.
And I misunderstood that he was not individually sending it. And I acknowledged, I have full faith in Andrew is not doing anything, so to say, inappropriate in any manner. And I wish to, now that that's all come out through, I understand Andrew's intent was fully, sort of,
In good faith,
in good faith and supportive, and there was nothing,
nefarious,
yeah, I don't even want to use that word.
malintent.
Yeah, there was no,
Sketchy.
nothing else.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Impressive.
Can I just
Do you
mention
have a
one
link on your
thing?
phone? Is that-
No, I'm just
you ready
that
for
good.
I have a little issue with any committee member saying that they're more important or more vested in the meetings than any one of the rest of us. And that was in the email, and it was just stated again. And I'd just like it to be verbalized that everyone is equally important and everyone's equally vested.
Yeah,
You stated it, so I'll second.
Thank you.
I will second that.
You're third.
Third,
That's fine.
fourth,
I think
fifth.
Seven
a
official?
good transition would be just one final recap of, and Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but like one thing that came across from the other three school board members was just, as we continue to look at options, the school board is particularly concerned about impacts to education. Like that was one thing that they really brought up, so tonight we're gonna be having a conversation about the redistribution thing, and I think, it's something that we should, if that does become something that we think we're gonna put forward in any capacity, like we do want, that is something they're gonna be looking for us to talk about addressing.
Of course.
Yep.
Can
So
I
it's-
remind people that it was 51 support, 49% against?
We're gonna have a conversation about
Yeah.
all of
Okay.
for-
You're jumping topics, slow down.
Self-selected in survey, yes.
Alright. Yeah, so they did mention that. Alright,
So I'll make a motion that we table the minutes from the last meeting.
That's good.
I will second it.
For the school board, the document that we work under is called FIC Operations Final Draft. It's in the folder. It's unfolded in the drive.
You want to vote on that?
It's basically my
So
thoughts,
Peter's gonna
which
vote.
makes me uncomfortable.
Alright, so I seconded the motion. All those in favor of Peter's motion?
I'm voting.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All opposed? Abstained? 1 abstained. 601. Joe online? Just leave it as is. Aye.
Okay, 701,
Correct.
got it.
Alright, do we wanna jump right into that conversation, or can I make an amendment to the agenda from what we ended the last meeting with about the 2 middle options?
Sure.
Okay.
I think it relates, so.
Yeah, so towards the end of, and I just wanna pull it up. Towards the end, we were talking about, we got rid of the new school, we got rid of the repairs only, when we went through it. It's on that screen, that's why I'm not seeing it on my computer. And what we were talking about was the renovation and the renovation with addition. We were talking about that, at least in my mind, that becomes one as a singular option that's detailed out by scope. So when we go to scope out what we want the RFP on, we let the architects and the engineers and whoever's there, the experts tell us, do we need an addition or not?
You detail what your goals are and say, how do I achieve this?
Yes,
I
yep,
need classrooms for this many kids. I need facility space for this, that, or the other thing, and then how do I get there?
That-
Can I do it with just a renovation? Can I do it with bringing the 1930s building back?
Right.
Can I do it with, do I need an addition?
That-
Well, there's a very distinct difference between those two options.
Being an addition.
Well, no. The one that is renovation only keeps all the existing 50s and 60s.
Yes.
Correct.
And-
The one with addition eliminates them.
Well,
So
you're talking
well-
as it's proposed currently.
Right, that was Kyle's proposal.
That was Kyle's proposal. We're talking about putting it out to RFP again and saying to whoever's designing it, this is our needs. How do you achieve this? Do you fix the 1930s building, keep all the other sections, fix them? Do you turn the courtyard into 2 classrooms? Do you add an addition? What do you do? Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't accept that proposal as what we're gonna do in the
Well,
future.
All right, let's take a step back then. Each one of them, as defined by Mr. Barker, has a cost with it. Right? So both of them are within $2 million of each other. As presented,
Okay.
right? So can we agree that those options with an addition is somewhere in the proximity of $27 to $29 million?
As proposed.
Well, Mr. Barker says that's what it's gonna take to do that.
With the, again, right, our point is, if we're gonna say a renovation, or renovation with addition, just that option,
Yeah,
we were gonna take, or I was assuming that we would do what we discussed last meeting and say, we put out a number of not to exceed of 12 million, 12.5, 15, all of those were thrown around. And we go, what can you do out of this list with that?
no, you can't go doing that now, because there's no answer to these questions anymore. There is no way to differentiate them. If in fact, this renovation is no longer repairs, you've taken repairs off the table.
We're saying the renovation's gonna include everything out of the on-site insight report, 5 years plus extra.
Plus bringing the entire building up to current building codes.
Well, I mean, as we've discussed multiple times, we need guidance on that, right? Like I think you've even said, well, I don't know that you have to bring it up to code completely.
Well, I'm just hopping on this because this is what Carl has told us in all the iterations.
Yep.
And you can't start saying now that it's gonna be something different, because we've asked him.
There's no straight answer in the code. I looked this week, the codes. Apparently there's the International Building Code and the International Code for existing buildings. And there's no way, neither one of them is gonna directly say this threshold. Apparently there's a grid you can go
Hang on.
through, you do an analysis.
Yes, I know all that.
So I'm just saying, you
I agree with
can't
that.
say you have to bring it up to code, you have to do the analysis.
I'm simply saying that Carl Barker's recommendation is that the building has to be brought up to full code to be able to meet all the educational needs.
But his number was what, 24 million?
No,
you're
So-
gonna-
28 million.
But even there though, you've crossed whatever imaginary potential prescripted threshold because you're way over this traditional 50% of
So
replacement.
we also never said that these options were gonna be Kyle Barker's proposal.
Right.
That's a
Well,
jumping point.
it's the only thing we have to go by.
It's a reference point.
It's a reference
It's
point,
not,
but
it's not gospel, it's a reference
Right.
point.
But we have the ability to recommend to the school board, it's ultimately the school board's decision, to go get an RFP for a renovation and take the top 10 items in the yellow list, assuming you're gonna satisfy the first 89.
I'll tell you what then, so let's stop talking about the renovations and additions, let's talk about the distribution one then. And
Well,
see-
One topic at a time.
Can I
But-
bring up
Well, no,
one,
but I mean,
I do think you need to talk about redistribution, because that impacts whether or not you need an addition.
can I bring one thing
Well,
about with and
but-
without?
Okay, so the reason why the redistribution was gonna be the mainstay of this conversation, right?
Okay, that's
The
right.
redistribution is gonna be looking at all of the things that needs to get done, not just, it also needs an addition, it's to satisfy that requirement requires whatever. I am looking at, I'm trying to get down to two options, right? I'm trying to take the renovation and the renovation with addition and basically say that's gonna be determined by the engineers and the architects based upon the scope that we put out.
I'm going to agree with you. I would like just to remind people about the survey that no one wants to discuss, but when we asked, would you consider renovating GMS without an addition, it was 47% positive, 53% negative. Would you consider renovating GMS and adding an addition, it was 60-40. That's a significant difference.
Mm-hmm.
But what if we
understand
discovered
what you're
that we
talking
don't
about
actually
scope.
need the space, like, that's the question, so like.
Right, well,
that's
I
an
think that's
assumption
what
we need
architects do, right?
So, when you go through go through the process and they'll say, if you do this, you definitely need to add 4 rooms. They could go through their exercise and say, you know what, if we reconfigure a little bit, you actually can make it work.
Yeah.
So without knowing having the people who actually design and build these things on a regular basis, have their feedback, it's an open-ended question, do we need a renovation, do we need an addition or
Well,
not? Not sure.
But our task is to pick one.
I also think.
That's why we're
with
saying
respect
combine
to
those
the-
two into one.
Renovation with
Well, no,
Well, no, we're
consultant
gonna pick
input.
one out of,
With respect to the survey responses, in terms of like the
Right.
difference between renovation plus addition, I
Questionable.
think, but I also think that people who are responding more favorably to renovation plus addition are probably doing so with respect to thinking about the portables, right? So
Right.
to Carrie's point, if an architect were to come in and say, we can eliminate the portables and by doing this without doing an addition, then
Right.
Great.
some of those people probably would.
I agree with you, except for
Well,
the scope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
let's look at the reality of what you just said. Let's stop and just talk about the renovations with no additions. There is no way, there's no way you can eliminate portables.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the redistribution is not an option in and of itself.
No, it's not.
It's a result of renovation only.
No,
So, like-
No, I disagree with you on that
No, yeah.
statement.
You can, but I run the school.
Well, it's okay, you can disagree, but, you know.
I can tell you, I mean,
You
at
don't get the
current,
vote.
currently, that's great, but I can put out the information. Currently, operationally, we are at minimum 9 classrooms short. So if you cannot, within the current space, renovation only, you're not gonna find 9 classrooms or working rooms worth of space. So that's what I'm saying,
If you took
we don't
out
have to
the
explore it as this third option. It's the byproduct, it's the result of going on a renovation only option.
Well, I think scoping it, right, like if we combine renovation plus addition, there's a scope that involves the renovation component. I think if we look at the redistribution model, there's a part of it that
And so
has
I
renovation.
would agree with what you just said. So, what we can eliminate is a renovation only.
Okay. If that's what, I'm just thinking that the way that I do this at work is I scope it out by need, right?
Right.
I say, I need to go revamp this building. I might need a Butler building in the back of where I gotta go stick dip tanks or whatever, but I need this space plus whatever. You tell me, what do I need? What does all of the codes, laws, OSHA tell me that I can get away with?
I mean, you can get the right architect who can get creative with the space you have and potentially find those classrooms. Right? The 1930s building, like you've said a million times, get you 4 classrooms. That's how many of the portables? 2 that could go
No,
away.
it's 4.
There's
4,000 square feet in
There's
it.
6 classrooms in the portables.
Right.
Yeah,
So
so you.
there goes 2 right there.
No, you take 4, because there's 4,000 square feet.
Okay, fine. You took 4 of them. Even better. You're making my point even more.
Yeah.
Right? There goes 4 of them.
Agreed?
And then if you like,
I agree.
you got creative and said that let's turn the courtyard into 2 more classrooms. There's your other 2,
Yep.
and now the portables are gone.
So,
Agreed? I'm
so,
not agreeing on that one.
But I'm just saying, like, you can
But-
do it.
but-
So that's why I'm saying renovations and
But-
additions to me is all one big umbrella thing.
Renovation scope TBD.
Right. It's
yeah,
a renovation
that's,
with whatever the scope needs to be to fit the needs.
It'll be renovations with an addition.
You're making an
I agree
assumption.
that- I do
I-
agree that probably, I
It has
think
to
that
be.
most architects would probably end up driving.
It would have to be, because there's no way you, and the point, going back to what Dan said, there's no way you can reconfigure what's there and make,
9
At
classes.
minimum 9 classrooms.
yeah, 9 more classrooms.
It sounds like we're all in agreement then. We all agree.
We are, in the sense that, I just want it defined, is that renovation will include an addition.
Most likely.
I don't want to say will. Possibly.
Well, and maybe the term byproduct may be the operative word, but I'm of the belief that you could renovate GMS, do all the stuff for the onsite insight report, and if you redistribute the kids, we have plenty of room. There's plenty of room in every school.
So again, it,
Without having to build-
renovation,
without having to build an
renovation
addition.
may be a component of
That's
the
not-
renovation plus addition, it may be a component of the redistribution.
But
I think,
renovation's made up as
I think
well.
for the purposes of what we're talking about though, we can eliminate renovation as an option because we can scope renovation plus addition and we can scope redistribution and include, it would have to include
Right.
renovation.
And I'll tell you
But I
why-
would say renovation with the possibility of an addition. I wouldn't say guaranteed with.
Sure.
Because
Yes.
let's just say, like, we
Yes.
got the RFP back that said, well, you need an addition, and it's gonna be $45 million. We're gonna be like, whoa, we're not doing that.
The reason that becomes so important, though, is if you look at Carl Barker's renovation with an addition, he forecast needing, because in his scenario, it eliminates the 1950s and 60s, that's 13 classrooms.
Right.
So now you only have like 10 classrooms left in the building.
But I'm not
You need
I'm
30.
taking I'm taking his report as a reference point, not as gospel
Well-
that we're gonna
Well,
demolish
I
half
also
the
have to say
school.
that, if I could, because looking around there, I think I'm the only one here who went through the RFQ process when we brought Kyle on. I think it's important to know too that Kyle Barker's options, you have to go back to the starting point of the work that he had, okay? So the RFQ that was put out for him and he was hired under was design us a new school. So then any option that he came up with was compared to the anchor point of new school, as opposed to hiring someone under, we have this school, let's make it best and build it up. So there's an angle at which the work was viewed from that I think just needs to be part of the context of the conversation.
With the exception, the big exception, this was done on his own after we terminated his contract.
He was just updating his,
No,
yes, he
there was
was.
nothing.
But it doesn't matter.
That's not
Like,
in
I
any
don't know
of
why
the
you're
previous
why are you so glued to that as the end all be all?
Because,
It's not though.
just let me finish. I'll answer your question. The reason that's so important is as a minimum of, how many more classrooms do you need right now?
Instead of classrooms, I need 9 at minimum
All right, he needs 9.
educational spaces.
He needs 9 additional spaces. Okay? So that's what? Just we pick 10 classrooms. So that is somewhere in the order of 25,000 square feet. You know how much that is? Cost? It's somewhere around, that is close to $15,000, $15 million. The point being is a renovation and an addition is in the order of magnitude that Kyle has in here. That's my point.
Okay, I don't think anybody's disagreeing with you though. on that.
Okay, the reason I,
But I'm not
Hang
setting
on.
that in stone. I'm gonna say, here are my needs, here's what I got,
it's.
tell
in
me how I
that-
get there.
It's in that range. It's not gonna be $12 million.
Oh, I didn't, yeah, I wouldn't think it would be.
Okay, good. So would you kind of, let's agree on what we expect the ballpark of the renovation and addition to cost. A
Somewhere in the
minimum of how
20s.
many? Million?
Somewhere in the 20s,
Somewhere in the 20s, okay, 20 plus.
depending on how far it needs to go.
20, let's say, we'll use Kyle's numbers, we'll say 20, somewhere between 20 and $30 million. Is that a comfortable range?
That's not for us to decide, that's for whoever does the RFD.
Hang on, we're trying to make a decision here, so we've got to put some context to what we're deciding.
That's where I'm putting it. I'm thinking like a renovation
All right,
renovation and possibly an addition is somewhere in the 20 to 30 million dollar range
fine, thank you.
without state aid.
Good, but that's the assumption this committee.
That's my personal assumption.
Okay, does anybody disagree with that?
Depending on
Yeah.
scope, no.
Because we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the point of, that's the problem, right? Is that I could go build a 100 square foot shed off the back and it'll be $5,000.
The reason this is so important
I don't know if there's
is this
room out back.
document I sent you out earlier. Going back to what Peter said last week, the redistribution option is somewhere around $8 million. Of
We don't know that either. We don't know any of these costs.
course you
Right.
do.
No, we
No,
don't.
What do you mean you don't?
Because we haven't had scope
We
of,
just
we have
say
no
less
scope of what needs to
expensive.
change at the other two schools in that option. We don't know what needs to get updated at LMS, we don't need to know what gets updated at
What
CHS.
needs to get updated at?
You're bringing a different group of kids, a different age group, it's
I
completely
think, what
different.
happens to do, change the urinals?
I don't know.
And the size of
But
the
see, why are
toilets?
you,
I
why are
don't
you so
know.
willing to accept that the renovation plus addition, Kyle Barker's information is this is the absolute
Okay.
number. But we
We have
truly
zero.
have not had the redistribution scoped out appropriately for us to even understand what that looks like.
We're just
It is-
There's a lot of
spitballing a number on that one.
The
The
difference,
educational impact of the redistribution needs to be considered.
So I
that's
didn't
a
even,
separate conversation.
No,
Okay,
it's integral to what we're just talking about.
alright, so, okay, I would like to make a motion to vote to change the title of renovation in addition to renovation with the possibility of addition and remove the renovation as an option.
Second.
All those in favor?
Is that the whole title?
One,
a
two,
really long title.
three,
Wait. Sorry, you need discussion.
discussion.
I'd like to add to your motion that we agree that that estimate range is between 20 and 30 million dollars.
No,
No,
no.
Agree
it
to
has
that.
not been
I gotta
quoted.
jump in here. Like, you even quoted on your paper, Ron. I just left a district that did a renovation addition project for $13 million.
Right?
Now, every project is different, so I'm not saying like a renovation addition project here is gonna cost 13 million. I'm also not gonna commit that it's gonna cost 25 to 30 million dollars. We have no idea until we ask for a specific
I
project what it will
think
cost.
one of the key things to understand too is that when he did his whatever,
Who's he?
Kyle
Kyle
Barker.
Barker was operating off of previous conversations with people who are no longer here. So we don't know
Like who?
Dr. Jetty
In a different scope
and
profile.
other people. Like his expectations for this project were ridiculous. Let's be completely honest. His expectations for the scope were insane. So as a result, we now have a new group of people who are, as far as I can tell, a lot more pragmatic. I mean, I
Why
actually
it
like
being
this.
solar? Let's start with that.
Yeah, right.
Let's not.
So let's
You're
just
just
say.
pissed with the company, not the actual technology.
Oh, no, both.
See, I find that incredibly refreshing since we were told it was too expensive to do nothing at that building, and then we blew through our budget. So, but that's another conversation because those solar panels get me pissed. So,
Solar
but
panels upset you?
that whole project pisses me off, quite frankly. So,
I never knew that.
you weren't at deliberative when I tried to shoot it down. So,
No, I wasn't actually.
So the reality is, the people who are in charge of those design parameters are no longer here. We don't know how a new conversation would affect his number. If he used his assumptions he made with Dr. Jetty and all these other people in the conversation, they could change your numbers. So why don't, can we at least come to an understanding that like redistribution is less expensive? We just don't know, like, is it half? Is it a third? Is it a tenth? I don't know. It could be $5 cheaper. It's still less expensive. But right now, you just have an order of magnitude. One's more, one's less. That's all we got.
Can I make an observation there? So there is gonna be no way that we can pick one of these two.
Why not?
That's not true. There's still
When
educational
if
We'll
I
vote
can
on it.
vote, I would be happy to vote right now on what I think we should move forward.
By the way,
But-
our vote is just to recommend a path for the school board to
Correct.
vote.
It is.
So let me ask, can
They don't
can
have to
the
listen
task-
to
And we don't need to be unanimous.
No, you
And no,
won't,
and-
you know, it just has to be a
And
majority.
you know, regardless, and I think I said this at the school board meeting or this meeting last week, we can suggest anything. The school board does not have to do it.
No.
Right.
They're not bound by anything. But we could do something that is splitting the baby, where we say, okay, we're gonna do renovation addition, and as a backup, and to give us some time as to what the impact of redistribution would be, is to say, here's the number, make up a number, I'm gonna say $20 million. If we do redistribution, is it all of a sudden $15 million? And we can make a decision at that point, or the school board can make a decision.
And you have to weigh the
At that
difference against the educational impact, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so we do have, like, that's the next part of the conversation,
I-
obviously.
I just wanted to change titles and, because the way I look at it, we're between recommending a renovation, no cost associated, we're only defining a scope to go get a quote, and we're gonna recommend a redistribution. Again, no cost associated, recommending that scope to be investigated, right? Because that's, and from what I understand, is gonna be a long investigation.
I know that, just 'cause I have it open because it was a topic earlier, and I know that the school board is going to work on it. Currently, for a guiding article, when it comes to redistribution, this committee is only focused on cost of impact to buildings and facilities.
Right.
The school board should also then investigate community impact,
Yep.
all the other impacts, but it says right here, the mission of the facilities approved committee is to advise the Litchfield School Board in decisions related to upkeep, maintenance, and improvement of Litchfield School District properties, sites, and facilities. So like, when we talk about redistribution, like,
Yeah, and I mean.
that's the scope of our work.
And to Peter's point, like, at the end of the day, maybe if we don't, if we get to the place where we're like still really not sure, we could really suggest both, because I do think that the school board will ultimately make a decision on, will have to decide whether they wanna pursue the additional work for investigating the redistribution option, because it is beyond.
I think,
What is I don't know, is there a lot, what is, other than sort of the, not to minimize it, the educational impact, from a structure standpoint, what has to change? And I know we've talked about pre-K through 3, I'm more a proponent honestly of pre-K through 4, because I don't know anything about anything, but if for fourth, the difference between a 3rd grader at the middle school and the plumbing and those kind of issues is different than maybe a 4th grader at the school. I don't know that we have to do much to the middle school, or if anything.
Pre-K through 3,
Pre-K through 3 at GMS,
and 4 would move.
4, 5, and 6 in the middle school, which I know that the superintendent doesn't love because it's going to be underutilized. But right now Campbell is underutilized.
And move 7 and 8.
He moved 7 and 8.
so Brian made a couple comments, right, and please correct me, like, he was, he mentioned, at least at the high school, there's talking about, we gotta move the SAU in order to make the room. And then there's gonna be some renovation, or I'll say repairs, readjustment of that space at a minimum, and losing the school store, if I again,
I think those were just like
possibilities.
I won't say off the cuff, but those are like initial, without diving deep into this, things that would have to happen, like just, like if you ask me point blank right now, if you were to bring 7th and 8th grade up to the high school, what would that look like? The easy thing to say is, you gotta get out of the SAU, because that gives you that wing,
We
right?
have a couple portables we're looking to get.
I know.
So we can move you to GMS.
I don't disagree with like any of those things, right? But in terms of like the work you would have to do, there would be now like not just like general conversation of what would happen, what is the actual practical steps if you were
But
gonna
I think
pursue
to
that?
his point though, for like students though, like you're not gonna need to change bathrooms, or readjust heights of fixtures if you move 7th and 8th grade up to high school.
So Peter mentioned, I think he kind of said this when he was saying that. I'm not as concerned about the 7th and 8th from terms of that type of stuff
Right.
as I am either 4, 6, 3, 6.
Right.
Because of my lack of knowledge of that educational model. I'm not saying it's good, bad, in between,
Right.
but I am not familiar with it because.
It's gotta be requirements somewhere that say what you need to have.
Well, there's different ways, I mean, every place is different, right, based upon their needs. You have big places that have really tiny primary schools that go into different things. I've mentioned, I live in Wyndham, right, they have a K4, pre-K4, they have a 5-6 school, just 5 and 6, they have a 7-8 school.
Tell me,
just for
Merrimack does it
7.
too.
And then a 9 through 12 school, right, and that's very different.
Right.
There are districts that have pre-K through 6,
Or
and then
next
7
door
through
with
12 schools, right?
Pre-K and K.
Yeah,
online.
you have districts that send kids at different times,
Yeah.
right? Like the district I just left. The town of Dunbar keeps their kids pre-K through 6, then ships them over to Bow Middle School, right? And then
That's what New
while
Boston
Bow
does,
is, pre-K through 4, 5 and 6 in Bow go to the middle school and they're 5th
Well,
grade.
then
So
that
it's
makes
all-
sense as to why you have
So-
different breakdowns.
So there's all sorts of different things. I'm trying to be like honest and upfront. I'm just not familiar with that
Right.
kind of middle. I've been trying to do some research to figure out if there's any school in that kind of configuration, and I can't find any. I'm sure they're out there, I just can't find it. When you see references to like groupings, you see kind of like the primary, middle, which throws 5th grade into the mix, junior high, which excludes middle school, and then like the high school model. And you sometimes see that like elementary age kind of maybe like Hudson does, I think, like a kindergarten school and then a 1st grade school, and then they're all together like 2 through 5 maybe or
They
something
have
like that.
3 different elementary schools.
Yeah, because they're
Middle
feeding
school,
into it and stuff like that, so you just gotta do some time and research. I don't know what you would need to do in the middle school, I just don't know.
Right.
Right, like in that middle building, like I would, again, like just reactionary would say like it would have to revert to more of a primary school
Yeah, upper
model,
elementary school.
right?
You don't
And you
have-
have buildings such as like the tech space in there, right? Like, are you gonna continue to do tech education in that middle building? If
Comes a
you're
robotics room.
Maybe,
Also
but like
the
then we gotta
exterior.
figure out, like,
You
are
need
we
a-
taking stuff out of there,
You
putting
need a
stuff in, like, you
playground,
gotta
you
figure
still
all
need a
that
parking
stuff
lot.
out, right?
But
I vote
Can I
robotics room.
ask a question?
Yeah.
And you probably can't answer it. I'm concerned about the domino effect. If you suggested a 7th and 8th grade, going up to the high school when my kids were that age, I honestly wouldn't have sent them. I
Well-
question how many parents are going to pull the kids.
I think, you know, that survey you referenced had something in there about 7th and 8th, and I think it was about a 50-50 split. I
Yeah,
think for
it
some
was.
people,
I think
they're
some people
worried about
thought
it, some
they
people
were-
they aren't,
I think
you know?
people would think that there'd be 2 wings when you look at the
Yeah,
photos, maybe maybe
and
not.
and just the way that building's physically laid out, I don't think you're gonna have like, this is the 7th and 8th grade wing. You could have the bulk of their classes there, but they're all gonna interact with each other.
How many
I get-
staff do you think you'll lose? How many
Well,
administrators do you
that-
think you would lose?
I mean,
So-
those are all the things you would have to, not just lose, but like, you have to kind of, like, if you move grades around, you still have needs in these buildings, right? Like, each building, for example, has to maintain at least a school nurse, right? But if you're gonna have 6 grades at the high school, do you need some sort of help in that nurse's office to supplant that, right? Because now all of a sudden you're dealing with like a different size population of kids, that might increase the cost of it. Like, that might not,
Well,
I'm not saying it is, right?
I would disagree with that to a
Yep.
certain degree, because that school's had 590 kids in it.
Well, I'm just
It's
using
at
that as a-
590
as a-
kids of 4 grades, and this is again something that I keep coming back to as we have this conversation. Yes, we can fit more students, but there's currently 9 7th and 8th grade classes. I don't have 9 extra classrooms to, like, yes, you can fit more kids in the current spaces that are being used, but there's not 9 empty spaces that you're like, okay, well, this is where 7th grade goes then, and this is where 8th grade
Right.
goes then. And that's one of the things that, again,
And you gotta make decisions about like where your cutoffs are, right? Like, if you're gonna, like, I know it's credit, non-credit, but that's like a real discussion on some of these things. Like, if you're gonna, I'll use Algebra 1 as the example, right? We have for Algebra 1 for credit in the middle school, it's a 7th and 8th grade, primary 8th grade, but I'm sure there's a 7th grader or 2 in there, right? Just from knowing that type of things. If you're gonna have all of them in the same building, 7 through 12, right? Are you just gonna have all of them take Algebra 1 together? So you could have kids as young as 7th grade in there, with kids in 10th or 11th grade in there. And I'm not advocating for one or the other, but those are the decisions you have to start making if you're gonna go down that route. And like, where does that take you in these conversations? You're clearly gonna have classes that are still non-credit bearing if you have 7th and 8th grade in there. And you're gonna have classes in there that are credit bearing. And how do you put up like those type of like educational decisions? Like, hey, why can't my kid's 8th grade art class count for their high school credit? Well, we need to develop the system that says it does or it doesn't, right? Like those type of things in place
So-
and everything.
Back to the
There's a motion on the table.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get back to. Is the motion that was on the table that has a second and a third to change the title and
We're still on that?
and
I know we go back to the tape, see if who got there, me for
and the renovation, and to remove the renovation. So the redistribution and all that domino effect is part of the conversation about redistribution. I am just talking about changing the title and removing the other one.
And what
Can we vote?
what's the,
Give them the exact language.
is the
So-
motion to,
Vote to change renovation and addition to renovation with possibility of an addition and remove renovation as an option.
Just a plain renovation.
Yes. As worded there, just
Yeah,
remove
okay.
renovation as an option.
okay,
There was a second and a third.
now you can vote.
All those in favor? Sorry.
One question, so does that mean that you're not gonna even consider just a renovation,
No, it
Yes.
would be done,
We
it would
are
be
gonna consider
done
it.
by the scope.
but you're removing it?
But
No,
That's
with
not
the
what I'm saying.
possibility.
Possibility.
we can,
Just as a possibility.
So ultimately,
Could
the
add it back.
renovation will be the result of whatever advice you receive from the consultants. You go in there and say, this is what I need, and this will say, you can do it without a renovation, great job! Or they may say, you might need to renovate and add 4 classrooms. But until somebody with that experience comes in, it's renovation with scope TBD, essentially.
I might have a silly question. I know I'm not a voting person here, but like, you've made a decision. You're renovating GMS. Like, the decision has been made. Like, when you eliminated repairs only and you eliminated new building, you made the decision. It's renovations. You just, now you have to do the work to figure out what that is exactly going to be, right? You've made the decision. It's a renovation. You're gonna touch that building and you're gonna change its configuration in some capacity, right? Like, that decision was made. Like, that's where we're at. We're doing a renovation. That's the recommendation you're gonna end up, it feels like, giving the board, because you're gonna go down the renovation route. And unless I'm totally misunderstanding all this conversation.
I mean,
So the
I think
only
it's taken
question-
us a long time to get there, but I
but
think you're right.
but I think you're
And I
sort
think
of-
there's two, there's the redistribution thing is sort of hanging out there on the side to see what the impact.
But see, that's where I think like the renovation doesn't necessarily happen if you do redistribution, right? You bring in the redistribution.
You gotta address the building. The building's still.
But that's where
Right.
that's where the repairs come in, right? If
So-
you redistribute, then you don't need to do a renovation to GMS. You need to do all the repairs.
One of the discussions was if you redistribute, you clean out or you free up some space to
Right.
do the core renovation that
Yes.
is so
Right.
essential. So if you do straight up no renovations, it stays as is. But if we move
Stays
kids
exactly
out,
as it is.
Well, no, it would include the $4 million to address the first 5 years in the on-site inside.
right, well, in which case then you need the addition because you need to put kids somewhere in order to renovate the core.
So I know this sounds so silly, and like, again, correct me if I'm wrong. If you're gonna do anything to GMS that involves changing like walls, you're renovating it. Like, that's a renovation. Like, if you change the config, and I think we can agree the current configuration is not successful for whatever model you wanna use.
I'm not gonna agree to that.
You know, I'm with Ron on this one. Like, right? Like, I think if you go to a redistribution plan, you can do the repairs only plan at GMS, and because you're only leaving K through 3 there, you now have the extra space you need to move classrooms around and bring central services into the middle if you want to, or put grades here or there wherever you want to, and you don't need to do a full-blown renovation of moving walls or adding an addition. You need to fix the stuff that's broken. That's if you go to redistribution. But if you're gonna do
With that plan.
a renovation with the possibility of an addition, then yes, you're gonna be moving walls, doing that kind of things. I think to me, they're two distinctly separate options that have, you still need to, with a redistribution, you need to touch all 3 buildings now.
Right.
You need to repair GMS with all the repairs that need to happen there. You need to make any updates you need to do to move grades. And then the other 2 schools still need their general maintenance, whatever's on the onsite inside for GMS and all
You
that,
have to fix those anyway.
CHS and all that
And
stuff, right?
until you know the cost of each one of those, you can't make a decision.
I would absolutely, and I could present to my director of these 3 options of what exactly that I would choose.
Oh, I know you would, but that doesn't mean,
You'll never know the exact cost, right? So we have some numbers from Kyle, we have some numbers from H.L. Turner, we have Insight, like you have ballparks to give you some guidance.
right, so.
And so now you can use that guidance to make your
My
decision.
guidance
But you
is
have
the
to-
redistribution is gonna be in the $8 million range.
But we don't in order
Okay,
to sell that.
that's fine.
You al-
Like, no one's arguing, like, if that's your estimate and then what you've got, like,
But-
that's your prerogative to use that when we go to vote and say, this is what I feel and this is how I got my numbers and that's where I wanna vote.
You
Like, no one's
also-
saying you can't
Denise?
use that.
You can't ignore the educational value
That
and
Of-
effect of moving the
all
kids
3
around.
schools.
Well, we don't know that's not an improvement, so I think what we need to do is we need to explore what it looks like.
Right.
It's
In order for
equally,
people to have an idea, is it better, is it worse, we need to look into it.
is it worth impacting 3 schools, 3 staffs?
Me? You don't want my answer.
Can I give you, can
I
I give
can't
you a
put a dollar
response?
amount on that,
I'll give
because
you a
I
res-
can't take a chance that it's not
But
gonna
we
be a
have to
better
have a
choice.
dollar amount that can pass, right? Go back to my
Because
my
I-
Dollar
conversation
amount,
with-
we could find a dollar
Because-
amount that will pass.
Because I.
Okay, what do you
What
think
you're
that
saying,
is?
I just-
In the 20s.
I think $20 million fails all day long.
Are they getting anything over?
All day long.
I can't recommend doing something that doesn't also keep the educational value in
We're
this
talking about
town.
doing some of the educational value things. We may not be able to do them all
I think
in the first go-round, but
I think
The
that's
effect of
It'll
moving kids
probably
to
take
CHS
longer than the
and redistributing
South
3 different
Bowl
grade,
building.
You know that the
Classes-
fifth graders ride the bus with the 12th graders, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
exposed to them all the time, so
But they're
I don't
exposed
think
at our
it's a
homes.
problem.
It's not like
But
all
it's
the
diff-
12th
it's-
graders.
No,
Most of
but-
the seniors
I
and
know.
juniors
But I guess
drive
the
us.
question is, we're making assumptions, and we need to maintain an open mind.
My
So we're
motion
coming
was
in-
on the
yeah.
titles.
Yes.
Yes. So-
Bring back the
No
motion. Let's
more
go.
words until that one's settled.
We should be able to
Call
put
the
on
vote.
titles.
I mean, so I guess, Bob, from your question, does with the possibility of addition answer your concern?
Yeah, because, I mean, you may, it's clear. I mean, I'm still a proponent of the repairs and then address the educational things later, but
Okay,
that's been ruled out by this committee, so.
so,
I'm sorry, I missed that one.
You would, it wasn't one vote wouldn't have made a difference.
so with that, are we ready to vote?
Call the question, vote.
All right,
I can't vote.
all those in favor of
Can you even call it?
the motion to change renovation and addition to renovation with the possibility of addition and remove renovation as an option? All those in favor? One,
You need to
two,
acronym
three,
that one.
four,
You can vote.
No,
Jim
no,
has
five,
raised the hand.
6, 7. Joe's got a hand raised, so that's 8. All those opposed? Abstain? 800.
Thank you.
One step.
But again, for the redistribution, now that we can go into redistribution, I think we have to approach it with an open mind. Everybody here is gonna have an opinion, but we need facts to base those opinions on. So, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know if it's gonna improve opportunities. We don't know if it's gonna decrease. So before we go yay or nay, we should actually look into it.
That's also not the scope of this committee.
Well,
The scope of this
I
committee is to
agree.
look at the facilities in terms of redistribution.
in which case then it's a no-brainer. because
We can recommend,
facilities-wise-
we can recommend the board look into all the other
Yeah,
stuff.
But facilities wise, then if we're considering what's gonna possibly vote at, then our job is done. Because-
That's not necessarily true.
Oh,
Because we're.
If we want to look at it,
Yeah.
then we could commit that we look at what the facilities cost of a redistribution would be. How much does it cost to
My-
retrofit the
my-
SAU?
right.
Where are we putting the SAU?
My thought is there are people here who we need to assuage some concerns, and the ways to do that was actually, well, what do we need to know? What don't we know?
I make a motion that we actually recommend to the school board to look at the 2 remaining options.
Second?
Did anyone watch the school board last meeting?
Yeah, so okay, so
It did seem
second
awfully
in
positive.
discussion. So looking at the discussion, so though I agree that our governance says we're looking at the facilities and that, one of the things that we did come out in the survey was that our options need to equally weigh educational, no matter what we choose, right, needs to equally weigh educational value with cost.
Right,
So the concern that I have with a redistribution approach is the potential impact to educational value at all 3 schools.
I guess that's where I would like to understand the concerns so we can begin addressing them. Because redistribution, if you move the kids into high school and you do that, well, now you've not impacted anybody but the high school and not really that greatly. Now you free up the space, it would be a stage.
I would disagree. Your impact,
Your schedule.
you're impacting every student at the high school plus all of the middle schoolers as well, because you're changing every middle schooler's schedule.
Okay,
You're changing the flow of the day for every student.
okay.
I mean, so it's not, you're impacting 550 kids.
But that happens
Right
every
off,
year.
right off the bat, and that's just without having any other conversation about educational
But I guess the
impacts.
question is that a
Right
positive
off the
change, a
bat.
negative change, or a neutral change? Because that's where you need to start looking at that, because there's pros to the changing the schedule, there's cons to changing the schedule. Before we get reactionary and say, oh my gosh, change is bad, we should say, what are the changes? Are they gonna be negative? Are they gonna be positive? Are they gonna be neutral?
So
I think it'll be different, kid by
yes.
kid, teacher by teacher, it'll be
And
different.
That's the thing, you
So,
can't.
can I make an observation, because Carrie, you and I have talked about this before,
Yeah.
right, like, I personally think if we were looking at this at a point where we could consolidate to 2
I
schools,
would love to.
it would have been, I think there could have been some serious savings and some serious, benefit to this. I think where I get, and I know people feel very strongly that we're never gonna have more students, we're only gonna ever go down until the population just disappears. But, but ultimately, the other thing that we're looking at with this is we will be putting the schools at max capacity, and I think
The high school will be,
one thing that I'm a little concerned about is, I'm a little nervous about putting us in a position where we've now made a decision that ultimately, like,
we'll have to undo.
at some point, like, it's like, now we gotta go build another school, or we have to redo this, or whatever, so, you know.
So that, I guess, so we have fewer than 400 kids in the high school at the moment.
Right.
You add 2 classes of about 100, you're still lower than the school's maximum designated capacity. So while I hear you, I don't register as a concern because
But is that
there was like
But-
600.
That's a
Well,
difference
so-
between 30 kids per class versus 20 kids in more classes.
How do you know that?
But
Because we've had these in the past. Have we ever had
So-
classes of 30?
I also look.
Yeah, actually,
Is that-
in your
is
combined
that
English,
capacity-
social studies, 40.
That's combined
But that was
two
2
different
classes.
classes.
But is
But
that?
it's the same kids in the same class with one teacher speaking for half of
teachers.
it.
This-
One teacher
English on
speaking
one
at a
side,
time.
social studies on the other.
But they
My kid
had-
had the class.
So
But
there
they
are
had
schools-
it
There are
in
schools now that still
separately.
have accordion doors in between classrooms so they can have combined classes. I know Souhegan has, all their wing
We have in gym.
has accordion doors that they can open up and say, we're gonna do a combined English social studies lesson. And then, yes, at that moment, you'll have 30 to 40 kids. But
So-
right
But is-
now,
can I
I
ask-
don't
I
register
wanna
that
ask a
as a
question.
concern.
Is that capacity that school is designed for 4 grades of that capacity, not 6 grades of that capacity?
It's combined, it's designed for over 600, is what, 600
But
total
you're-
plus
but you're
the
looking at it
gym?
as-
600.
I would say
Kids.
600-ish. give
You're
or
looking
take.
at it
I
as
don't know the exact
bodies
number.
who may not all be in the same class. You're not going to put that 7th grader in the 12th grade English class, right? You have to have enough space to have now 6 grades worth of
And it all depends on how you
teaching.
structure
I think
it,
where you
though.
run into a
But they
problem
all-
is teachers won't have a classroom that is theirs all the time.
The other.
I don't think they have
I
that now,
think
do
the
they?
big thing is there's so many unknowns, we just need to take the time to
Right.
research,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like, if you're gonna go down that road, and I would not advocate being that the sole thing you're gonna offer up to the school board in 2 weeks, cause there's so much unknown
Right.
here, right? Like, if that's something that you wanna throw these 2 things at the board, that like examine these 2 possible options, right? And the board elects to say to me, the superintendent, research these 2 options and come back to us in X amount of time
Right.
with a report on this, then we're gonna spend some time researching it.
I think it's-
We're gonna interview schools that are 7 through 12s, right? And be like, what works, what doesn't work,
Right.
right? How many schools in the state are 7 through, we'll just start with New Hampshire, how many schools in the state are 7 through 12? How is the
But
physical makeup of it?
Combined.
Right, like do all this research, right? We use the Bedford example. The Bedford example is they're 2 separate buildings essentially. They share an auditorium and a kitchen. I think Monadnock, because I used to live in Keene over there, their 7 through 12 are all intermingled with each other. But
Right.
don't quote me 100% on that. So you have to do all that research. And then you gotta present that out to the board, to the
Right.
community, see if that's something that is of interest to them.
So-
Listening to the school
But you're-
board, it sounds like it'll take more than a year to do that.
Well,
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm a new superintendent who's never ventured down this road of trying to
I'm just
examine this.
listening, you guys
I
are
have
there.
no idea.
Yeah.
The one thing that you need to do, though, is in that conversation, you still need to put cost to these things.
I think first we need to understand what.
I think you need to understand the educational needs of that.
But
Right.
my recommendation is to charge the school board to go start looking at those now, hire a consultant that is looking at the cost, works with you to develop, okay, here's the first iteration of options to address X, Y, and Z.
Maybe.
Matt, can I ask a question?
You need somebody at your disposal to help you identify the things that we're gonna kick around till the cows come home with no help.
We could vote and say to the school board, hey, look at these 2 options. They could say, nope, we're just gonna look at one,
That's right.
hypothetically.
Yeah, and so that was gonna be something that I was gonna,
Sorry, I wanted to bring up one thing. Carrie, what concerns me about if we bring 7th and 8th up, right? So you projected it was like 554 students or 543
I
or
would
something
use
like that.
540 as the number, 90 kids per grade.
Is that, my concern is that puts that school at 90% theoretical capacity. So
but
if
you're
there
saying
is,
90 per class. How many kids are in the 9th grade class currently? Low 80s.
9th grade?
Like around, yeah, they're low 80s, but.
So why 90 per class then? Why not 80,
Isn't the 7th
85?
grade class big right now?
Yeah,
Seventh grade class.
but how many do we lose 8th into 9th? every year.
Because 90 is a round number, and I don't
No,
per
I'm
se
saying-
83.
I hear you.
Like, there's
No,
no, like,
no,
magic
but
number
But
for
what I'm
that,
saying
like-
though is, right, there's going to be flex in there. You're gonna be comfortable
Yeah,
with one
right.
number. I'm gonna be comfortable with a different number. And so, we might not be speaking the same numbers, so I get what you're
Right,
saying.
right, so I'm not worried about the numbers, I'm
I
looking
understand.
at, I'm looking at total capacity.
Yeah.
Design capacity is 600, we're at 543, let's
Yeah.
say that flexes by about 20 per year, right, between all 6 grades, it's probably gonna be more than that.
As you're building a lot in town.
So I'm looking at if that flexes and then let's say in 5-7 years,
Okay.
we're on the upward curve again, that building is now at max capacity.
And then I say we soak the builders and the developers for a new wing.
So then,
Like, why should I have to pay for it?
but then the concern comes down, we're gonna be back at this situation on that building in 7 to 10
Right,
years.
and this is why nothing gets
No,
done
no,
though,
no,
because
I
we're looking
disagree.
at, we always are looking at, well, what could happen, and then that what could happen doesn't happen.
See, that-
Because when they put in the Page Road developments, we were gonna get 80 kids on just the single family homes, and we got
Right.
10. We were gonna get 80 kids to the townhouses, we
Yeah,
gotta
but
get,
like-
so you
but like-
can't do that.
But on the flip side of that, like, didn't you talk about how when we were looking at the fire station, you guys talked about, well, maybe we should do the police station, and then it was like, well, that's not gonna work, and then now we're faced with the police station issue, it's like, it's,
Well, we knew
it's a
that was
double,
coming.
it's a double-edged sword, I know, but I'm just saying, it's like.
What you're asking us to do then is to build for the expansion of developers that has not yet happened.
Well,
There's
what-
impact fees.
No.
Have the developers put on
No,
a freaking new wing.
What we're
am-
asking for is to put the education of these kids first, rather than, and not affect 3
Right,
schools to fix one.
the kids we have now, not the kids we might have in 15, 20 years.
Do we have a second on the motion? We did, okay.
Alright,
What are we voting on?
Was this literally just
To recommend these 2 options.
I thought
we
we
did
did
to
that already.
recommend
We
these-
voted on that.
Oh, no,
No, no, no.
To recommend these 2 options to the board.
So, okay. Can I just make one more comment on this? So, obviously, so I raised the issue about like, you know, again, we can, you know, agree to disagree that maybe we will hit capacity, maybe we won't hit capacity. I'm not convinced that we're gonna have declining enrollment forever. I do think at some point the population's gonna start to pick back up.
Some of us will die and other people will come into our house.
Potentially.
So- So pleasant.
But yet the overall national trajectory doesn't indicate that, so go ahead.
No, but that's fine, but when you look at that combined with the level of investigation that I think has to go into trying to achieve this, again, if we were talking about going to 2 schools, I would be like.
I'm happy, let's do
Yeah,
it.
let's, well, I don't know how we're gonna do that, but I'd be all on board with that, but I think if you also factor in, now again, please don't crucify me on this, Ron, specifically. If you take a look at the.
Matt, you and I are buddies.
I know, nice. I know it's all, you know, it's all positive.
I
But-
appreciate your enthusiasm and dedication.
Well, thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.
You know, if we do take a look, and again, I understand that people are saying, well, you know, the survey's not representative, but like, we did it for a reason, right? And we did all try to work towards
We
this.
spent 9 months
So,
doing that.
You know, if we do give some, because we haven't really given any credence to that, if we give some
No.
credence to that, and we give some credence to the matrix. Now, we talked about weighting things, I know you were really opposed to that, but ultimately, the thing that I have a hard time factoring in with this survey is, there was a reason why some people voted strongly in favor of something versus strongly not in favor, or just, I'm in favor. Like, they obviously were having some thought process with that, so I think it's helpful to understand. And again, we can all agree that maybe there's a whole bunch of people who are anti-school who just didn't even bother taking the survey, that's fine. But for the purpose of looking at the survey, I took a look at it and I wanted to see if you weight those things just with a, you know, a 0.1 or a 0.2, not like major numbers, so we're looking at, like, oh, this was 30,000 and this was 500, right?
Do you have those?
I-
Do you want them?
I did it with those numbers, and so the redistribution option weighted, again, using 0.1 and 0.2, so if I strongly favored it, it was 0.2, favored 0.1, strongly, you know, didn't favor negative 0.1, negative 0.2, okay? You got a negative 5.2 for redistribution versus the renovation plus addition was a positive 17.2.
What does that mean?
So, well, what it means is that there was
It's
a
Of the
much.
people who answered it.
Of the
But it's
people
still
who answered it,
irrelevant.
there was a much stronger preference towards.
So here's my concern
All the-
overall,
sorry.
is our taxes are going up, what, $1,200 this year, if everything, even more if everything passes.
No, that's if nothing passes.
And then in another 2 years, we're getting whacked again, and in another 2 years, we're getting whacked again.
Right.
Continue. So at what point are people gonna say, dude, the well's dry?
So
So I guess that's
I'm not
why.
done, I'm not done. So,
I'd say it's this year.
the same thing with the matrix, right? If you look at the matrix and you assign, did we say yes, yes was a 0.2, maybe was a 0.1, and no was a 0. There was actually no zeros, and there were no no's in either of these
Right.
columns.
There's
And it was not as,
There is.
If only we'd asked what people were willing to pay.
I didn't see that on there.
it's like fourth from the bottom.
Okay, well, okay, so.
Now the numbers are skewed.
Yeah, whatever. But either way, it was, the matrix slightly favored the renovation position. So my point being,
Mhm.
I think if we're gonna go the route of two things, I would probably suggest, and I'm on the school board, so you guys can, I shouldn't even vote on this, because you guys can tell us what you want to recommend.
Well, there are 3 school board members right here now.
Only one's voting.
No, but I'm just saying, there's actually.
Potentially.
No, it's not potentially.
One.
Well, we don't know that. There could
Opposed.
be a big write-in
I'm not
campaign.
elected yet.
Yes, you are, because you're
But
unopposed.
he's-
That doesn't mean anything. I'm not
He
elected
hasn't been
yet.
sworn in.
I'm just making an observation.
But,
My-
yeah, but he
my-
doesn't have a vote yet.
My suggestion is, if the school, I think that the school board likely is going to say, we want one. Like, that's been sort of what we've
So
been
that's
given the whole
cool,
time.
and we can have this conversation again in 10 years.
Can I bring up one point?
I'm just saying, I think we would probably
Because
should word that
nowhere
as.
did we ask, what tax base are people willing to pay?
Can I make a comment about that? If we want our taxes to go down, we need to have someone else to pay more, whose house is worth more than our house, because it's all relative to each other. So,
Yeah, okay.
so we want $1 million homes into this town, potentially, to decrease our taxes. It's the only time our taxes are ever going down.
They don't, new houses do not put taxes down.
No, it's definitely
But it's-
commercial.
New houses demand more in services than they pay for in taxes.
But if you want your
New
individual
houses.
tax to go down, you want someone else to pay more than their
I
fair
want
share.
costs to go
Oh, that's not
down.
gonna
I
happen
want
before they-
costs to go down.
The only way people are gonna come and build
I don't want them to come
more
build.
expensive houses are if you have a good
There's a
education
big,
in
long
the
debate, and there's a
town.
171-page document at the Economic Development Committee about the impact of schools. But the reality is, Brian, you maybe you know this, what was our budget for last year? Not the year before you came. Total expenditures,
Like 26-ish, give or take.
all right, and we had how many kids in the district?
Thousand.
Like
1100.
1100-ish?
More than 1,100, a little bit more.
So that's like $20,000 a student.
No, it's a lot more than 20,000.
Well, the cost per student is pretty high. It's more than what general people will pay in taxes. And
And
that's only the school demand. That doesn't include plowing and all the other stuff that goes into it.
remember that divide this year's default budget by 1,100.
So ultimately,
Can't do that in my head.
It's 28 million.
there is the belief that more houses equal lower taxes, and I'm gonna tell you that's not true.
More expensive houses.
Nope.
It's
Decrease.
Well, no,
not.
I get your point, right, because one of the things we did talk about is build $1 million houses.
Yeah.
Okay, the only place you're gonna be able to build $1 million house is on 3A, right?
Not
You
good.
can't do a lot of build over there.
You could knock down my house tomorrow and build $1 million home. It'd be worth more.
$1 million house, they're gonna want 5 acres or something, it's gonna be big.
Eh,
You're not gonna
not the
get,
ones
you're not gonna
gonna
get
be
a
big.
lot for
That
$1
doesn't help
million.
bring your taxes up, right? You never build enough of those to make that impact. You need commercial
Well, you-
spaces.
You can, if you want to be a Bedford or
To
Hollis
get-
or
to
I
something.
get
don't,
back
because I had to.
Denise,
Get back on
the
tax,
argument,
if I may.
the argument
Yeah.
against that is that residential also puts more demand on the resources, so therefore the cost of the resources goes up more, so ultimately, that's why commercial is a more
I was like, Bedford doesn't
endeavor
float
if you
because of the
want to
houses.
issue.
Bedford floats because of the river road corridor.
Yep.
And they've built a lot of.
And you can drive through Bedford having never been there and you go, where do the people
My
live?
But if we
opinion on
get back
Because they took
on
them
task
over.
here, because I'm tired and I don't wanna stay past 7:30 tonight. Sorry. School vacation, this is when I actually catch up on sleep.
So the
I
recommendation
might shoot
comes
myself
with-
in the foot for saying this out loud right at this exact second, but I'll say it with Peter and Matt, both right here, who are current school board members. If this was to come to the school board with these two options, I would be comfortable saying to the board, I will do research and report something out by the end of the school year. Now, that may not be a full-blown report, right? I don't know what that would consist of. But I know the board wants one option, ultimately they're gonna decide that as much as they want, but when we have that discussion at a school board meeting, second meeting in March, I think is likely when we'll have that discussion, and I'm
And
asking
I
my
think
thoughts
that's
on this,
awesome.
I would say, if you want me to do the research, I'm comfortable doing, that's part of my job, right? Like, that's part of doing this.
Both lean-
I want people to understand what the educational reality is, and I say this because I literally don't know what that is. Like, I personally have never done this, right, in terms of taking a school district and redistributing grades throughout it. I've never worked in a district that has a 7 through 12 high school, so I don't even know that from a firsthand thing. So I think it's a worthwhile exercise to help people in the community understand these options.
I just glanced through the New Hampshire School District website, and I couldn't find a single school in New Hampshire that's 7 through 12.
There are.
There are a
There
bunch
definitely
of
are.
them.
Now, they might have different names, right?
Newmarket.
Like Winnisquam Regional High School, I know is a 7 through 12 school, right?
My last district is about to become a 7-12.
Yeah, so they're
Newmarket
out
Junior
there.
Senior.
So there are
Okay.
good schools making the change.
White
Not
Mountain.
on the list.
But I appreciate your willingness to do that, the research, because right now,
Almost
I feel
Brooklyn
it's the
says
one,
7-12.
one item that we haven't really looked into. There's gonna be strong opinions on both sides, and without the facts to back
Yes,
up
we
either
need facts.
side, there's not, you can't have a worthwhile conversation. So I appreciate your willingness to.
Can I ask
I
a question
agree we
about
need
that though,
facts.
too? Because ultimately, Kyle Barker did present on, like, he did do some
Then you guys
investigation.
shot it down before we even researched it.
Well, no, I mean, I'm not, I mean,
Not
I'm
you,
not,
not
by the
you
way,
personally.
I'm not like necessarily
Right.
opposed to this, right? Like,
Right.
I just am ultimately trying to figure out what's the right thing to suggest, because ultimately, we also have to face the reality of if it ends up taking us many more years to
Timeline.
figure that out, we've got things going wrong left and right over at GMS, so, you know, it's just
Well,
something
then, if we had to, we would do, we could bond out the first 5 years and get it where it needs to be.
Yeah, but
I
there's,
understand, but
You have
if
to
we
do,
think
you
it's gonna
have to
be
do the
4 years from
repairs
now,
if
we
you do the
still need to do those
redistribution. You have to.
repairs.
you what?
You have to do the repairs if you do the redistribution. There's no
Period.
ifs, ands, or buts
Oh,
about
no,
it.
I know, but the question about whether you're gonna do it, you're gonna start tiering it, or doing it like
Actually, you
piecemeal.
don't. You can redistribute and not do anything, Gene.
But my question about that is, though,
we
my
can't
question
use-
about that is that, you know, Kyle Barker is
So
someone,
you let the
if we
building
were to put
continue to
out,
deteriorate?
if we were to put out an RFP for for someone to investigate this, right, like, he's someone that would reply to that, and we don't, at least there's some sentiment on this committee that he's not trustworthy to answer that question.
Well, I
So-
think, you know, and Ron sent out this thing about the bow thing, the bow renovation addition thing for $13 million, adding 8 classrooms. A lot of the stuff that's in here is stuff that's on the onsite insight report, and they did it for $12.8 million, which is,
You said there was an addition to that?
Yeah, 8 classrooms.
8
Okay.
classrooms.
So why are we trying to say it's 20 million then?
I'm not.
Yes, you did.
You did. You tried to get us all to agree to it.
I'm saying, we need far more than 8 classrooms, that's the point. You
I didn't
can't
hear
just
that. I
get by
heard
with
Dan
8
say
But if
no.
you've
classrooms.
got 8 classrooms with an addition,
For
you
12
fix the
minutes.
30s building, now you got another 4.
Well, the thing that you can't really analyze there is, was their existing building much more centralized such that they were able, you know what I mean? 'Cause we have a
But that's what an
we have a
RFP
problem
does.
with our-
That's what an RFP does. You say, here are my needs, how do I get
Are
there?
you raising your hand?
Yeah.
Yes, I
yes.
have been, and it hurts.
Hey, you gotta go, ooh, ooh, ooh.
No, don't do that. There's bad
Is there anything?
connotations.
Is there anything stop? Like, I guess I asked the school board members on this. Does the school board expect us to present them a plan, or can our recommendation be put out an RFP and get us someone that can walk us through all the stuff? Because if that case, I'm not a voting member, that's the direction this board needs to go, because we are wheel spinning right now.
Right, yeah, and from what I'm
So I think the
understanding
recommendation
is
to the
it's-
board would be, get us someone
But I think the thing that I'm trying to get
I
out
think
of
we
this
need to-
committee.
to
though-
explore.
X.
But what
X and Y.
what I'm trying to
X
get
and
out
Y.
of this committee though is, what's important to me is the thing I just said about Kyle is, ultimately, if we put out an RFP and someone like Kyle responds to it, are we gonna be in the same place where we're like, well, we don't trust Kyle's response?
Again, I'm gonna go back to how Kyle was hired.
Right.
Kyle was hired to design a new school, so every other option backed into that. We are gonna put an RFQ, an
But
RFP
he
to
came
hire
back,
someone
but-
to front end into
But in
all of the
fairness,
different
though,
options.
He came back and did try to readdress some of those things. Like, you remember, he came in here and said, look, that failed miserably, and, I feel bad that it failed miserably because the task I was given really was not.
And I get that, but I think that was given the weight of, or the forethought of like, I've been thinking about this for the last week and a half, and this is what I'm thinking, as opposed to,
He was hired to go get us a
An RFQ with a specific scope and parameters in which to work. Agreed. He gave it a second thought. It was a detailed second thought, but it was a second thought.
When are you talking, when's the second thought?
No, what Matt was referencing when he came back
When he
after
came
the
back
vote.
to
When,
this
when
group,
this
right?
when this committee was first, and he goes, you know,
You mean that, right there?
sure.
That's it.
Can I just make a comment that we should
That's
be very
$29 million.
careful before we talk about someone's professional reputation and people of district, not you,
His reputation.
but his competency, because I think it can be
No,
very
what I'm more
damaging.
talking about is what is this group going to deem acceptable, like, when we go out, like, should we be, I guess I'm getting more towards, does this group think that we should be going and saying, go get an architect to analyze this, or does anyone have any strong feelings one way or the other about who we should go seek out to help?
We should
Yes,
seek.
we
out,
should go out
honestly,
to
we should
Who did
seek
the
out.
Who did the bow extension?
I think Turner did.
We need someone who's willing to work with us, and
I
I'm not seeing a
think
whole lot of
what
people.
But I don't think
you're
you need to
all trying
specify.
say is
Anybody-
we have to go out and do an RFP, right? This is New Hampshire. There is less than 5 people who do this work. Probably they're all going to.
I can name
vote for it.
Yeah, they
Like,
do.
and that's what it's gonna
You
be.
guys are the
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you don't have to
Yeah.
specify what type of person you're looking for, whether it's an architect or design build.
That's
step 2. The RFP or RFQ is for the engineering or design or project consultant who helps us word an RFQ to get us to get this scope of work.
No.
I think you.
I don't think you need 2 people.
Realistically, we don't even know what redistribution looks like.
You're
I
saying
think the
2
first
people?
task is to just.
No, no,
look at
a
the
person that
I think
helps us
facts on that
form
would
the
be
RFQ.
I'll
very,
help
very
you put that
Yeah,
together,
I
that's
mean-
all you have to do.
Facts
Yeah, I
would
don't
be
think
very
you need that.
helpful for that. Office.
Yes.
I think you have to talk to the whole town. You have to talk to the students, you have to talk to the parents.
I think we gotta figure out like
What does it look like?
What does it mean
what
internally
is it?
first?
What does it really mean?
Are we talking about redistribution account?
Yeah.
Well, because we can't.
Good
move
lord, that was
forward.
whiplash.
No,
Can
I
we
know,
get back to the
but
motion?
I'm trying to make progress here. We kind of know what we're looking for renovation, what happens, who's affected, how, we don't know what the impact of the redistribution is. How does that affect your bell schedule? How does it affect busing? How does it affect classes? What does that look like at the end of the day? We know what a renovation and an addition is gonna look like. What does a redistribution?
My
look
only
like?
concern with tasking you with this is.
Well, then you have to task it, but yeah.
Well, but okay, my only concern with tasking you with this is the same problem that we've run into historically in this district, which is we put jobs on people who, not that you're not capable, but like, this is like
An additional,
how do you, like, yes, you can go say, okay, well, like, there's these educational concerns or whatever, but like, ultimately, I'm worried that we need like people who have actually like have studied this or implemented this to be able to say, okay, these are all of the things that you have to look at.
Well, and I think that's what I would do, right? Like, I would go talk to people who are in these type of environments, who are doing these type of things, research it, and then report back out, right? Like, if we're talking about the redistribution stuff, for example. And I think what people have to do at that point, and I don't mean to be flippant when I say this, but I would be representing myself and other educational professionals, right?
Right.
Like, who are the expert in these areas. And the expert opinion might be like, this is a wonderful idea. The expert opinion might be like, there are a lot of pros and cons, right? Like, that you as a community have to decide. The expert opinion might be like, if we could do it over, we wouldn't have done that, right? Like, and I think then people just have to understand that that's what educational experts are saying. So, you know, tasking with that work, that is fine. In terms of the renovation thing, like the bow, I had like a good understanding was because I worked in the district and the way we were set up, we talked about these things district-wide all the time, but I was not the elementary school principal while this project was going. My understanding is when they proposed the project, they put it out for bid, and like this, they had these have to be done, like repair stuff that has to be done, and then they prioritize these other things, which would be yellow here, in order of preference, and they got some pricing relevant to that. All right, if we're doing the full list of the stuff, I'll just call it the yellow list here, right? If you're doing the full yellow list, it's gonna cost you like $21 million. But Like, and it was, well, we don't have $21 million. What does it look like to do it in 11 million? Oh, all of these things come off, right? Ooh, we definitely need that thing, so let's put these things on. And they may come back, well, if you're doing this, you've gotta do this,
Okay.
right? Like, those are linked. And they came to a decision of this, I'll use 13, nice round number, $13 million proposal that definitely doesn't have everything they initially sat down to get, right? It got enough to make them happy and satisfied as a district and as a community that they were doing right by everybody with their renovation and their addition. It is a completely different school and a different project, right? But some of
that's the
those
right process.
lessons, I think, is stuff
But you
that we
went-
can mirror here.
I
You went
agree,
through the
and I think we
process.
have to be willing to accept that we're not gonna necessarily get everything we want.
And I think that's exactly like if Marilyn was here, she would say like when they went through and did the high school, like that's exactly what they did, right? They made a list of needs and a list of wants, and right, and like
I wish their wants or needs was a little bit longer.
and how many like of the needs can we get,
Welcome to
and are there
Litchfield.
any wants that we may be able to get in there under the budget that we have?
Right.
When you went through the
What do we have for
process,
budget?
when Matt got involved with the school board and being brought into it, how many other people went to the meetings with you? How many other people gave their opinions?
I was there.
Two
Yeah,
of you.
that's true. It was
Same
definitely,
people
it was
did the
definitely hard to
survey.
get engagement. It was hard to get.
Well, you
The
can't
attendance of the
interest me.
community forums were
Was-
12, 14, and 8.
Because the reality is, Lavasar knew how we were voting before we had it, so.
And that's a
So-
big thing to know, the deliberative sessions had nobody there. The town had far more than the school, and that's,
For last year?
This year.
It was embarrassing.
and I believe you need to be careful. That's an indication that people are gonna stay home, because I've already made up my mind.
But,
The answer
but
is
at the end
no.
of the day, we have to solve a problem.
I understand.
Right? And so, you know,
So.
We have to solve the
let's
problem
go
with
back-
the money that we can actually get approved.
but so here's this is the challenge with that, right? People in here have like their own feelings of like, I think it's this number, but like, I don't know how we figure out what that number actually.
When I
No, I
presented
agree.
this last week or 2 weeks ago, I picked a number
the
literally
hat.
out of midair,
Right.
right? It was 5 million for the onsite insight plus.
Right.
But I think that's exactly the process that Brian just described gets you there, right? Like here's the full list of all our needs and all our wants. You go to the RFP, they tell you it's gonna for the full list it costs you X. And then you say, okay, well no, I can't do all of it, right? Like just like you're
But we
doing
don't
your
know
shop
what
at home, like I
it
gotta take this, and this off. Now what does it cost?
But here's how they did that. They actually had H.L. Turner as their consultant, asking these questions to the contractors,
H.L. Turner?
and then coming back and forth. You had to, they had Turner leading that discussion.
Hey, well, there's a difference.
You
There's
have-
Turner Construction, there's H.L. Turner contract, like consultants.
You have to have
They're
someone
not the same.
to show up to
Turner
have the
Group.
discussion though.
They're not the
Yeah,
same.
no, I don't care like how
The
that.
architects.
Well, that'd be H.L. Turner. I thought it was
So
Turner
I said,
Construction.
that's who it was.
But that's what they did. They went out and they put out their RFP for their needs, and they came back and got.
I agree.
So that's what I'm saying we need to
We don't know
do.
what our
I
budget
agree
is
with
though,
you.
ultimately.
Okay, good.
Great,
Yeah,
but,
but
You gotta look at both
All
those
right.
options.
so they didn't either, they went out and got a quote first
Then how
for
do you
the
know
whole
that fits
list,
within the budget?
and then they whittled it
Then
down.
they
to
brought their
say-
budget back down. They knew what their max number
But
was.
how do they know what that max number is?
That's
Because
the quote they got.
They don't. They have people in the community who felt like it was the right number, right? And like I said, it's apples and oranges. It's a town meeting setup, right?
Well, because
So-
we had a meet, several years ago, we lost $2 million.
Yeah.
There were 3 town meetings, which are actually well attended.
That happened?
We had 3 townwide meetings, and there, yeah, I know, there were post-its up front. And they asked people, what increase are you willing to accept in order to offset this? So at the end of these 3 meetings, there was a percentage, it was 3%, of what they were willing to accept as an increase to cover that loss. We don't have a similar reference point for here. So what I feel is a reasonable budget or not, may not be what the community expects. We don't know what we're working against. That's my
But-
concern.
But I
Right,
don't
but I
disagree. with you.
think-
I think that's a charge of the school board,
Right,
right? Like that's their. Like once you get this number through this RFP process and say,
I
okay,
just don't wanna spend money.
the max number is this. We can whittle it down from there. What do we think the school board is going to have to decide? What do we think we can get
Yeah,
the
but
voters
they've
to
been wrong for the past
support?
30 years.
Well,
So
Well, I
how
would
That's
say
something
there's,
you can do
there's
in
a
parallel.
broad spectrum of what that number's gonna be on the screen.
right. So, but to Carrie's point, right?
but you can do that
Hold
research
on,
he's talking about.
Guys, you do it in parallel. We tell the school board, go investigate this, and at the same time, our charge, or the school board's charge would be, go figure out what the community will support. And then that way you get a number, and then we get the other side of the community will accept this with a bond for 20 years
How do
equals
you have,
this.
you have any idea how you would approach that?
I agree with you, Ron. I think it's gonna be incredibly hard to have the,
I
Sorry,
hate to
approach
have
what?
us throw all this money at another solution and have it fail again.
I understand, and that's the conundrum,
So,
honestly.
we really need to have an idea of what is the maximum people are willing to pay?
But
Because we're gonna get, they're gonna be.
What I like-
And
That's
how
like-
successful,
that's like- that's
how
your job.
successful have they been lately?
But we-
Okay,
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, but that's their job.
People.
My job is to give them the recitation to say, go up to the for this and all these needs, and then you guys gotta figure out how much of those needs can we do.
So
for
this
a
is like
budget
a
that we can get
10-year
passed.
nomination.
I think what's hard, Carrie, is that, like, you have a good understanding of, like, what translates to tax, like, how taxes translate, right? But, like, a lot of people, you're gonna say, well, how much more would you be willing to pay? They're gonna be like, $5.
Nothing.
$5 a year. It's like, they're just pulling that number out of the air because they don't wanna pay more, right?
Well, those
Does
are the
anybody
people
wanna
who
pay
have-
more?
But, well, there are some people who apparently have a money tree that I'd love a piece of. But
Just a branch.
I don't
Just a
wanna pay
branch,
more
but
taxes. I don't
think-
wanna pay more taxes,
I
but
don't
I
think
understand the
anyone
needs of
should pay
maintaining
more.
a town, right? Like, I understood the need for a fire station, the need for a police station, the need for a school, like, I get it. Like, my taxes will never stop going up. Like, that's just not the reality of how the world works.
sure, but there's enough people who are
Unfortunately,
not of a
Social
similar
Security doesn't go up with
philosophy
it.
that will vote no.
That's the federal government, you go talk
But
to them
those-
about that.
How do we get those votes yes?
Some people think that it's a responsibility as the citizens to educate the younger
So I
generation.
resent the
I agree.
implication there that I don't, or
I
people
didn't
who
say
vote-
you.
Or people who vote no don't share that, so some people literally can't afford it.
I agree with you.
So
I
it's
know
not
many
a
of those
matter
Well,
of-
folks.
in fairness to Denise, though, there are a subset of people who say, well, I don't have kids in school, I don't need to pay for public, like, you know that there's some.
Oh, absolutely, but and those are the people,
I think that's a pretty small group.
There's
Right,
a
she's
small
not-
I think that's a
wrong,
bigger
really.
group than the
But
people who
there are
can't.
people in this town, look at how many over 55
You
communities
don't
there
have
are.
any kids in the school?
People
You
who
don't
are,
care.
just realize they're only getting a 2.5% increase on their social security this year. How many of them are already tapped out that when we get this tax increase this year, they're slammed, and now you only wanna put them on the hook for a
You
whole
raise
bunch
your hand,
more?
you're tapped out?
Money has to
Can I
be a factor, we just
Yep.
don't know our budget, and that's why I said we don't know the budget.
We are all trying to keep money involved. Some of us are trying
So
to
how
keep
does that work,
education
though?
involved.
The budget's, you just said the budget's zero.
Here's what's gonna happen if you're not careful. Same question I asked you before. How much did you spend to open school this year at GMS?
How much should we spend to open school?
Yeah,
I don't
How many
understand.
does that mean?
repairs?
zero. You spent zero. How much do you need to spend next year
me.
to open school
No,
at
but like
GMS?
facilities.
Just wait.
Zero plus one.
I'm serious about this. Zero. You've done that for 30 years.
I'm 40 years old, Ron, so I've done nothing for 30 years.
You being the school board.
Right.
And I found scopes to fix GMS that's exactly like Turner, exactly like Onsite Insight back in 2000.
But it doesn't matter because you
Just
just said the
take-
budget's zero.
I know. And the school board has chosen not to do any of those repairs that's in there. So people have said, okay, but you open school. And the mindset of people are going to be, I'll tell you what, if something breaks, we'll fix it. Come to us when it breaks.
Well, we don't even do that.
Huh?
We're
We
trying to
don't do
get
that.
away, we get,
What?
the
I'm sorry,
school
what'd you
board gets
say?
hammered for that all the time. We're trying to get away from that.
My point being, is that is the cheapest solution. And that's what people can
Doing
vote.
nothing is the cheapest solution. Of course
Exactly
it is.
right.
Always the cheapest solution until
So
it's
the
not.
problem, that's what people are voting
Until we do an
against. is
emergency.
It doesn't cost me anything to do nothing. So I'll
Well,
vote
because-
no.
but
But
that's
it, but
because
it
they- that's
does,
because
like,
they
that's the
don't
mindset, like,
understand.
I totally get what you're saying, and there's plenty, like, I totally understand that, but
Yep.
the reality of doing nothing can, like, if you can maintain your home, what happens to it? Your
Nothing.
roof starts to leak, your windows start to leak,
I'll go patch the roof, is it?
okay, you can patch it this time, next time, what happens next time?
I'm
Eventually,
actually-
it's gonna fail.
Did you go on that roof?
All I'm
There's so many
saying,
more patches you can put on that roof.
look, all I'm saying, this is what you've got to consider. You have cried wolf for 30 years that GMS is falling down and it's gotta be fixed. You've said that for 30 years.
I mean, we almost didn't have school the other day because the plumbing failed.
What failed?
It's a long night.
Fix it.
Well, no,
Fix it.
Mold in classrooms.
So,
But my point being is that's what you're up against. And I think you need to get down and, you know, you need to take the onsite, inside, and that's the baseline that people are gonna look at. You could fix the whole thing for $5 million. Why aren't we doing that?
I am not gonna take that figure until I get it quoted.
Well, quote it then. Go quote it, please.
I think you hurt your town when you don't invest in your schools. And look,
I'm not arguing with, I'm arguing against the people that 66% that said no to the school.
They said no to 40.
56%.
44 million.
But they said that forever, and
No, but forever was 18 years ago.
what?
The last time we voted was 18 years
It's been
ago.
4 times, schools have been brought forward,
Right.
and all
But
4
it
times.
was
failed.
18
That's
years.
a new
It's a
school.
long time.
so I think it's smart
To not
to
go to
not
the
try and
school.
go down the new school.
So what,
Right.
But you do have to invest in your schools, you do. You need to invest, like you say it hasn't cost your town anything, it is, look at your enrollment. Right, like it's costing you families, that's what it's costing you, right? You look at towns and school districts that have invested in their facilities, their enrollment is increasing. I live in one of these towns, we have spent a lot of money on our school facilities and the enrollment is increasing. Wyndham is a Division I school now, it's one of the highest rated high
You know
schools in the
why?
state. Because we invest in it.
no, you know
Like,
why?
that's
Somehow you have figured out how to
Comparable to
get
Litchfield.
education proficiency
Not that
up
much.
at
I
a
live in
level
Gary.
that
My
people
taxes
want
are
to
higher
send their
than some of
kids
the
there.
things here.
Because the
This
town
is not done
invests
here.
in the education. Like,
because they're
Don't get me
recruiting,
started.
because they're
we're
able
paying
to
teachers
recruit.
like,
Yeah, because they're able to recruit teachers. Like when you
They also
have
have
good
business
school
space,
districts,
don't you?
school facilities.
yeah,
So everything, so that's awesome that you guys are invested, but when you have the ability to fall on a business base and to offset the load on the poor farmers and other people, and that's awesome, you're in a different position.
There's not a
So
whole lot of
we-
farmers left in town.
Yeah, because we're building, and so that's why I
Yeah,
want to
because
stop
they-
the
No,
building.
because
Because
there's not
they
people that
sell.
are buying farms and farming.
Can I also, can I just say
So,
too,
but the
because
point is,
I,
again, my biggest concern on this is we don't know what the budget is, so we can throw, what is the, you can have a $7 million renovation, you can have a $25 million renovation.
I-
So, like,
I don't think you're wrong.
Can we
But
agree?
again,
So
I
I'm
think,
very concerned.
I think that's the charge of
I'm
the
not
school
there
board to
yet.
figure out what their budget is.
Can we agree to do?
can I also
a
say about
budget?
the HL Turner report and the
I don't think that's our
onsite
job.
You
insight?
need to do a
No.
passing budget.
A
Um,
decent budget, based on
Go
reasonable
ahead,
budget.
Dan.
You may have.
The onsite insight report, as I read it more and more,
Hey,
it's less of a repair plan and a more of a replace plan. It just replaces the fixture. Nowhere in there does it actually make an assessment of the quality of the structure. It says
This is
that
broken fiction.
piece, that component is past life. To replace
Yes.
that
Income.
component costs this.
Well, and it-
So it never made an assessment of, it didn't look at the quality of the walls. It just says, those are out-of-date windows. You're gonna wanna replace those windows. So I think we need to just be cautious in calling it a repair plan when it is a majority a replacement plan.
And it's also a replace in kind, right? Like
It's an
when the
in-kind
woman came to
replacement,
the
yeah.
school board and talked about it.
Yep, so there's
It's
schematics
not-
and all this stuff they would have to figure it out, but I mean, I
She
think
even
it's.
said that most people you're going to hire to come fix the HVAC system are going to tell you not to put in the same thing. They're going to give you some other recommendation, and that comes with a completely different cost than what she quoted in
Exactly.
there.
So it's a repla like, I can't think of an analogy, but the more I read it and the more I look at it,
It's a
it's a
starting
replacement plan more than it is a.
Right.
But it's a starting place, yeah.
It's
But
your
it's a
floor.
replacement as opposed to, so when we reference it as the repairs only, it's really the replacement only as opposed to, I don't know if we're actually repairing. Repairing define making it better.
All right, I'm gonna interject there. Here's the problem, is there was a woman, I think a teacher, came to the school board meeting and complained how cold it was in the rooms at GMS classrooms. That simply means you need to fix what's there.
I think part of that too is related to the air conditioning design changes as a result.
No,
of
well, that has
air
nothing to do with
requirement.
air conditioning. This is heating.
No, but they,
And the heating system in there has never worked. The control system doesn't work.
That's true.
So individual rooms have to be controlled by valves that people turn on and off. And there's reports, I can show you reports, that we've
Yep.
known this for 25 years.
yep.
And that's fixing, and that takes care of the controls in each one of those rooms. And that's
But this
that's
is where
what
it
should be
snowballs though,
doing.
it snowballs because then you start talking about, okay, but when we literally look at the bare minimum, we're not addressing any of the educational.
But we also have, on top of that, drafty windows, correct? Well, you know, like, there are other factors going into that.
And
other-
that's all in the, that's all in those two, on-site, inside, and HL turn. They talk about replacing all the windows. In fact, you and I talked about, if you were gonna do it, instead of making them all glass in the windows that are now, we would put them down and fill in walls and have smaller windows in there, insulate the outside wall.
Oh my
It would
God,
cost
that
just a
building's
minute to
already-
do that.
That building's already like a dungeon, you wanna take the windows away now?
Why not? Put in, my,
So-
I have people that prefer to have less windows in their classrooms and bright lights.
And these,
Okay,
That's what you got in the,
It's
you know, on this now.
We've had a lot of discussion. Can we get back to the motion?
alright, so the motion was to recommend these two to the school board.
Can we vote on them individually?
No, the motion is to vote on them as a group and send them both to the school board. That was the
Correct.
motion.
And let them decide.
And then let them decide. Now,
I
So
don't want
you-
to vote
you-
no because I don't agree with one of them. And
No,
that's
You're
what
you're
I'm-
voting yes,
You're voting
no,
against the
consideration
group.
as a pair.
So
Not
you can-
one or the other. Do you want to send them as a
That's the
pair,
current
yes or no?
motion.
that is the current motion, and it was seconded by Mr.
And you're
Leary.
free to vote no.
So, all those in favor?
Can you get Joe back on the line?
Oh, we lost Joe? Uh-oh.
The silent vote just disappeared.
He's not waiting to be admitted.
He's like,
I
"No."
Must have got
Except,
sick.
I don't have his phone number.
It's hard to really jump in when you're remote.
Alright, so, voting?
So.
We had a motion in a second, right?
Yes.
So,
it's if he's
Do you
not
wanna
there.
call
Yeah,
the vote, Carrie?
he had to drop off because he was
Carrie, wanna call the
still
vote?
not feeling
I
good.
keep, I call it out!
Go ahead.
Yeah,
So-
whatever
that was
it's
Bill
called.
Spencer's.
Alright, so all those in favor of the motion to send both of these as a pair to the school board? All those in favor? 1, 2, all those opposed? 3, 5, abstained?
Can I make a motion to send repairs in addition?
Give me 1 second.
Before you make that motion,
You're gonna get killed in the community if we don't review.
They don't
well,
like
no,
me
so here's my
anyway.
thing, I'm not comfortable recommending it yet. Like, I think we at least need a little bit more to give them, as opposed to just like, hey, by the way, go review these two options as a blanket. I'm not opposed to like doing more investigation on that, or having Brian, like, I think if Brian's willing to get us more information, I'm not opposed to that.
The
Not in
school
2
board
weeks.
doesn't.
You don't have
agree
time
with
for that, though.
anything.
What's the name of the next?
I know, but I don't think, but
And when are they gonna
my
meet?
point being that,
It's a 10-year
I think if we
appointment.
present to the school board just
Is
blanket,
this
just
so-
go with these two
Is this
options,
one done now?
there's a higher chance that they may not look at both options.
What do you,
I'm just saying that I think
tell me
we
what
need,
you would like to see from what direction?
I think that we need more, we need to be able to provide more information about what we think the school board needs to specifically investigate with that, in order to get them to actually
I
like,
think
not be
Can
overwhelmed.
we vote on recommending the one option and come back to the second option next time? We could recommend both of them individually.
I
It doesn't have
think,
to be much
I
pair.
really think it will look poorly if we nix that one without more information. Quite frankly, I think we're all about
I
being
agree.
transparent and open,
So
so
why did
if
we
you're,
vote
if
against
you're
it?
recommending one and not the other, you're
Because,
effectively
Ron, you have
nixing
to
it.
remember that
Well,
ultimately, if
we
we
didn't
if we
recommend
vote
both
to
together.
recommend both
You
of
can
these to the school
recommend
board,
both
the school board
individually.
can say,
I think you would have been
we're
better off
not,
doing both
we're just gonna do
together,
one. So my thought is,
cause it allows.
I
you
wanna
to-
find a way, but I wanna
I
find
hear what he
a,
says.
but I wanna find a way to send something that's a little bit more concrete about this particular option, because this particular option, I think, is the hardest
What
one
do
to
you-
understand.
Well,
All right, can
I
I-
think if I could jump in, if I can understand what you're saying, what your concern is time, right? Like, is,
I think we need to be able to say, to the school board, this isn't just like a, go spend the next 5 years investigating.
Right.
These are the things that we think you need to look at, and we think you can do it in this amount of time.
Well,
In order for them to, otherwise you run the risk of,
People advocating against it.
I don't know what we can do.
Didn't you just vote against it? What
Well,
did you
hold
not
on.
vote?
I,
Can
So,
we
But
even?
Matt,
wait,
I'm trying to
wait,
understand what, Because I think, you know, because look, you've got 3 of the people that are gonna be dealing with this. Let's
Right.
be honest with you.
Right, so
tell
my
me what you'd like to-
anticipation, so what we've gotten from the school board is, what I'm getting from the other 3 members of the school board, current 3 members of the
Yes,
school
right,
board is,
yep.
we really want you to give us one option that you think the community is gonna get behind. I agree with this group that if we don't solve that redistribution option, like if we don't actually settle that we run the risk of something not passing. I agree with that. But I don't wanna put a recommendation up, because ultimately, once we make our recommendation to the school board, they can just, the other 3 members can just choose to say, we're not gonna
Go down that path.
go down that path.
So
So
would-
I prefer,
Be better to ask the school board, because
And
you
not
can't
go down that
task
path?
anybody from this committee. Ask the
I
school
would go
board
down the
to
path if I want more
authorize,
information.
The superintendent to
Well, that's why we're
explore
trying to-
redistribution before making a vote.
Well,
Yeah, and I think-
and that's where I wanted to get to. I didn't want to recommend the 2 as a pair as pure go do it. I wanted to create a scope around the distribution and a timeline
that's.
suggested
that's
by
where-
Brian on what it would take for him to get a report together.
Yeah, and I think like going backwards, right, I'm not saying this is the goal, I'm gonna throw out a
Goals based on the past.
the goal is to get some pass, yeah. But the goal is to have that thing that is going to pass is on the March 2026 ballot. Like, and the ultimate decision of the thing you're gonna pursue was some sort of renovation, then we would need to figure out when that would have to go out to bid, right? Cause we would need that work and then be able to do
When
that.
you say bid, define what you mean by bid.
Or whatever, get work done
RFQ.
towards this stuff.
The reason I'm having.
No, it's 7:20, I just wanna like explain this.
Well,
Like, because like a redistribution, like you're not gonna have every single detail of everything ironed out. If the goal is to have a decision made to put something on the ballot in March 2026. Cause Matt's right, I could take 3 years and make this my doctorate, not that I'm getting a doctorate, but making this my doctorate thing to research this, and we won't get anything done in 3 years, right? Or we could get some work done in 3 months before the end of the school year, with the understanding it's not gonna be the answer to every single question related to redistribution, but we have to make a decision whether that's gonna be the continued option, or going out to get help along with this other stuff, you know what I mean?
What was the time?
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I'm thinking. What was the timeline on the last school thing with Kyle Barker? What was the timeline between an RFP and when you guys got quotes in hand?
I wasn't on the
we-
board at that point.
We hired Kyle on an RFQ that was put out. That process was spring, summer of '21. He came on board fall of '21. That's when we had the community input sessions. Then in summer of '22, something happened that paused the whole process for a year.
Like COVID?
No.
LMS.
Yeah, we lost some stuff, and then, but everything kind of paused, and then spring of '23 was when Bonnet, Page and Stone through the RFQ process. That was like March, April 23, 24. No, yeah, 23 was brought on as the general contractor, and so then the bond in 24.
So you get a price and call it 12 months worth of work. You put it, so you take out 22 just out of the fact that it was paused due to various things, right? You had 2 quarters, 3 quarters in 21, and then you had the first quarter of 23. So it was roughly 12 months for them to say, for the school board to say, I need something
No,
to
5
get,
Well, so you had the design process, and then from the time that Bonnet, Page and Stone came on in the spring, we had to have a number presented for the budget committee in November, December of next year.
It was
Can I ask why, like-
January, or first week of January.
Why can't your RFP go out and say, you look for a design build company or whatever that brings you a price at that time? Like, it sounds like you guys went through like hiring a designer.
We were designing a new school. The RFP was for designing a new
I
school.
agree.
Okay,
Design
so
build makes more sense.
Yeah.
you hired a designer and then you had to go out and find a builder to give you a price on that design. I'm saying put out an RFP that says design it and give me a price to build it all in one.
Yeah.
I want one number at one time.
Yeah, that actually, when Brian said that there's 5 or 6 in the state, that option brings you down to like 2 or 3 that it's
Can I make
that's
an
single shot.
unpopular suggestion? I know it's gonna be unpopular to you, because I know you really don't like Kyle. But personally, I would benefit from having a discussion with someone who designs schools, just to say, what are the things that we should be thinking about with this? So that way we can maybe like make an educated list to send Brian out to, I know you have ideas, but like, just to like give us, as someone who's designed schools, maybe it's, there's things that we say, I don't agree with that, and we can scrap those things if that's the case as a committee, but to me.
Using it as a model, because it's come up a few reference time, could you talk to Dwayne and say, what was the RFQ, and Bo?
That would be the first thing that we would do, is we would go up to Bo and sit down with Dwayne and be
Say,
like,
what was the RFQ
give
that
us-
started this process?
Not even like.
Give me that so I can change the word Bo to
Give me
Litchfield.
yours.
Right,
give me your
Change
RFP.
the-
I'm gonna change the
name.
Bows to Litchfields, and let's.
Well,
Find and replace.
I guess what I would be interested in, right, to back in what that deadline needs to be for you to get a report is, how long did that take? Right,
That-
for
I mean,
them to
that's-
go from an RFP to having a
Yeah.
price in hand to put on bond.
I mean, that's what we're gonna, Dwayne is the BA up, the
Right.
business administrator up in Bo, right? And that would be the question I would probably ask Dwayne, maybe not this week, cause he's probably away, cause it's school vacation, he goes away during school vacation, but probably next week when we go.
Can I throw a monkey wrench into that whole thought?
You, Ron? What? No.
Do you ever consider, would you
We sure we can trust Dwayne?
gonna throw in anything regarding state aid?
No,
No, we
Not
won't.
gonna get state aid.
Okay, so this is all gonna be done with no state aid?
So.
You're not gonna get
Why would
Not
you
gonna
apply
get
for
state
it?
aid.
But you don't know if you're gonna get it, right? You're gonna apply for it.
it's
So
not
the
gonna
current,
exist.
not-
so the
you're not gonna
current
get it. It's
update
not
on
a
the
new
state
school.
aid stuff is, my
Well, you
understanding
can't
is that they're
apply.
not
You can
funding,
apply.
they're not gonna be funding.
I'm not saying you can.
I thought you said you can.
Well, we're still gonna apply.
We should still apply.
We're still gonna apply.
Always apply for
Yeah,
free
right.
money.
Hey,
If we're gonna go in any direction other than the new school, my understanding is we would have to reapply anyways, so
Yes,
we're gonna get
correct.
red done list, so.
Yes, but apparently.
can still do it.
Number 15 got it, because everybody else above them.
We're gonna
So
keep
it
our
doesn't mean no.
application in
We're
anyway.
gonna
No, I'm
keep
not
the
saying we shouldn't do
application.
it, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, I'm
Because
just
there's
saying.
no harm.
But I also.
It is dependent on a new build,
You
but the
should.
reality is we just don't know if there's ever going to be state aid again
Right.
available for projects, period,
No, that's true.
period.
Where's Ray?
Well, the reality is.
Right, like, we don't know, like,
But-
this, one of the things that's being discussed at the state level, I'm not advocating for or against or any of that stuff, but the reality is that there are legitimate discussions to no longer provide state aid for school building projects,
And-
period.
So you're gonna go to your
In lieu of
former district
operating,
and
right?
ask,
Support,
Will what?
operating support.
Well, I think
Or
they
grants.
realize that there's other things that they're prioritizing in terms of educational
Right.
funding
Yes.
compared to.
so you're gonna go back to your prior district and ask about a project that was a renovation plus addition.
Yes.
My whole point about the Kyle Barker thing was, again, I know he's done some work on a redistribution and consolidation. And again, we may not agree with all of his analysis, but
right.
at least that's an architect who's willing to come talk to us, that would be willing to talk about just some of the considerations.
Sure, but
Yes.
Matt, I think
why,
anybody who wins the RFP will come and talk to
Ask
us.
Serta to come from Bo.
why not just,
Because I don't necessarily know that I wanna pay for it.
well, you can
See
explore
that, see,
design building.
I'm gonna argue, I'm gonna really object to that,
But-
because you're interfering with the very process that you want to go out and
Well, no,
solicit.
because you're not suggesting that we put out an RFP to have someone come talk to us at our next meeting.
No.
You're talking about one specific
No, I'm asking to
person.
call them up and say, would you come talk to us about the boat project?
But the
I
boat
can certainly
project,
ask.
but the boat project was a renovation plus addition, we're
He wants to talk to someone about redistribution.
Why would
So-
Kyle know about redistribution?
So whatever-
That would be
Because
a,
he
that would be.
investigated that.
Whatever
Is there a
school
motion?
just didn't we just mention a school that.
The only thing I'd-
Moving 7 to 12?
His old one.
So
right
then
now.
that would be a good
Which-
person to
which
talk to.
one?
Somebody just talked about moving to.
My old district is moving to a 7-12 building.
So
So-
I'll
realistically,
tell you
very
now,
good person.
there's no process and thought going into it.
Well, that's-
They're just doing it.
Are they gonna do
So-
combined or two separate buildings connected?
No, it's one building. It was built
So-
in 1969,
the only
and that's what they're doing.
the only thing I'd want to talk to Kyle about possibly on a redistribution is what physical things would have to change with the buildings.
Well, he talked about that, you need
I
another
know-
gymnasium, you need
You
No,
another
we don't.
cafeteria.
We don't.
It.
We don't need another
But that's fine,
gymnasium
but-
or another
But there's
cafeteria.
also, he's done other schools, so it's just, to me, it's like, okay, well, like.
I'm not talking about things that
design-
you would want to change. I'm thinking to talk about like are
Just
must
required.
change,
What
like
are the
required to
must-haves?
change. That's
So
the only
if
thing
we-
I
Not
want to
the
If
know.
we put
Not the
fourth
wants.
graders at LMS, do we have to change the height of fixtures? Like those kind of
That's what I
things.
want to know.
Right.
Like how much needs to actually physically
Like,
change to move
yeah.
a
Are
grade.
there are different spacing
So,
requirements for different grades, like does
I-
that change if you bring them up here?
So I think we're not gonna answer that question tonight. We have another meeting next week.
Well, the reason I asked that question is because we're running out of time if we were to try to bring someone else in to talk to us.
Right.
Talk
And-
to us about what, Matt?
All the stuff that we just
Is
said.
it just, about
Kyle Barker's-
moving the kids around in the schools?
So.
That's
so
not Kyle Barker's area of expertise.
He's an architect that designs schools, Peter. What are you basing it off of?
I would rather have, us talk to schools that have done it, have been through
That
it.
was a renovation plus addition. We're talking about a redistribution.
No,
There are other schools that are 7 through
Okay,
12.
so that's fine. So we can talk to schools that have done it. We could talk to architects that have had to design it. Like, it's more information.
I think really what I'm interested in is like, how does it affect the buses? Does it affect this, how does it affect the scheduling? Do you have, what would it look like? So apparently teachers now have their own rooms. Would we have to switch that up? Like how,
Where's
what
Brian
changes,
That's all helpful to know.
what changes in the operation?
Where is
of the-
Brian going?
Brian's
Other
going
than
in
air
the portable that's getting
conditioned
bigger. So,
Going back.
What about coming for your sponsor,
So
Kitchenettes and everything.
I have my ideas of how I resolve each of the issues, but I wanna know, what do you guys, as the people in the buildings, what do you see it looking like? Again, anything can be done, but what would it look like? What do you think it would look like?
I think to split the difference here, like, I think it would be wise to talk to both educators about these different models and architectures to get some of the nuts and bolts that are not educationally like based, right? And a good thing is like toilet size. Like I know that sounds silly, but that's a big thing. Is there a difference between, what is the recommendations? Like 3rd and 4th grade might be a legitimate split there, right? Like that type of
There
thing
is.
where, yeah, so like, it definitely is with class size, like requirements between 3rd and 4th, right? So it'd be natural to think that there's some
Sink
sort
height,
of-
toilet height, all those things.
Yeah, all those things, so to ask some, cause I don't know those things off the
So-
top of my head, so like asking an architecture,
Right.
such
Grade
as Kyle,
toilet seats
or
this
someone
wide.
else
Right.
about
So,
the specific
so
things.
we're 2 minutes over.
It's this wide.
Here's what I would like to do. So I hear what you're saying. What I would like to do is, can we combine that when Brian's trying to do his 3 months worth of research as to the educational impacts? Then we can talk to the architects at the same time to figure out what are the, call it the physical impacts.
Which
That
architect
doesn't
are you
go-
talking about?
I'm just.
So
I
it
don't-
should be hired.
I don't
we have
think
to,
it
it has to go
matters.
to
I wanna be sure that's what he's talking about.
Well, the only reason I'm suggesting that is because if it in any way helps frame the questions that Brian asks as he goes out to investigate these things, that's my thought process on this, is that the more, Brian's admitted, he's never had to look into this before. So
Right.
he's gonna just ask the best questions that he thinks he should ask, but having something else,
Well, I also have to say too, besides Jake, the North Country one, there aren't many in New Hampshire that have actually made the transition to. So you have like Newmarket Junior Senior High. It was built that way. Like a lot of the schools that are the districts that are arranged kind of the way we're talking about have been that way for a while. I'm curious as I want to hear from districts, or we may have to go beyond New Hampshire, districts who have made the transition to that.
I think you're.
That's where the information that I don't know is.
I really wanna know that 3 through 6 stuff.
4 through
Like,
6.
4 through, whatever
4 through 6.
it is, right? Like, and maybe that's the thing I need to, like, put my mind
But-
at ease, that it's a
Because
3
it
through
may
6,
not
not a 3
be
through 6.
any,
but
there
to
may not be
Dan,
any.
I think that the
but to
third
Dan's
graders are
point
this
though, if these other schools were designed for that, right? You're gonna have to frame, like, when you go ask the questions, you're gonna have to look at it through the lens of modifying
Right.
things, right? So that's why I think having some, if we could jot down notes on, okay, well, these are the things, like the toilet thing, right? Like,
Right.
whoever's
Really,
responsible
that's
for
what
toilet.
it's plumbing fixtures, like do the
I-
plumbing fixtures
I-
need to
Well, it's
change?
one thing.
I think if we had, I think if we wanted to do that and we had it down to a limited physical scope, right? Not talk about all of the other stuff, but we talk about what physically needs to change at each of the buildings to accommodate for the different redistribution of grades. I don't think, and it's gonna be, I don't want quotes, I don't want prices, I just want a list.
Yeah.
I don't think we can get quotes or prices.
So,
So, but you
well,
can have a
I-
flow chart of what
so
happens, like.
I will even go, I don't even want him to suggest a price. I just want the list of what does he have to change.
That's all I'm.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
all
Well, and again, I
I'm
also
saying.
think redistribution is a byproduct of one choice as opposed to the starting point.
I don't know.
I
don't agree with
think,
that.
What
okay.
if we
Well,
move forward and we get a cost and a price and we know the number, da 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 da, and we can achieve that without redistributing? Why are we wasting all of our capital on investigating the?
Because my point is, we don't need an addition if we redistribute.
No. I'm saying, if we get the number and the addition, we say that's way too high, now we have to pivot, we've already been doing some of the stuff
Right,
on
and
here.
that's-
But we don't lead with the investigation and
But that's
redistribution. It's an effect of a decision that's
You've
being
got that
made.
number right here, that's the
Okay.
point.
That's not a real number, stop putting it in my face that 6 times tonight, Ron.
We've already voted against, recommended both of them. Now we
How's
either
that not a real number?
backtrack, recommend one, recommend the other, or
Details,
recommend
you
both of them
better
individually.
go to a bond with.
But I think Denise, I think that there's a fairly common consensus in here that we have to do more investigation on
But
the.
you're not gonna get that in 3 weeks.
I understand
school
that,
board
but
probably
but
has to do
that's
that.
the whole point, is that my whole point was that we need to be able to go back to the school board with, this is why it's not gonna be done in 3 weeks. We think you need to do this.
Then maybe we go back on a vote
Well, you
and
gotta
bring
meet,
them
we have a
both.
meeting next week, right?
Thursday.
Thursday.
Yes.
I think we know what we have to discuss next Thursday, right?
Yep.
Like what is gonna be the actual,
Ask
Ask
to the
of the-
school
of-
board,
to the
or
school
the
board,
recommendation
right?
of the school board.
I think it'd be wise if we're starting to go in circles a little bit, all starting to talk about whatever, take a break from this. I think
So-
there's been progress made
No, we
today.
don't.
So do you need to make a vote to ask them to explore, because only the school board can task you with
Oh, I
it,
guess,
this
yeah.
committee can.
I think that's something that we discuss next time,
Yeah,
like how
I-
to do that, right? You
You're
got
right.
2 board members here who can think it over, you
Right.
know what I mean, and put their school board member hats on.
Because to me, there's just not enough information to convince people to change their mind on redistribution.
Correct. I think that we're at a lack of information. Now, the only thing I'm gonna say before I call for an adjournment is I will be on work travel next week during this meeting. I will call in,
Good luck to us.
if you call it that, or it's a blessing that I'm not here. But I will I'll make amends, so that way I can get out of my building and back to the hotel room so I can call in for this meeting next week.
Point of order, I'll withdraw my motion.
Already voted on
We
it.
voted.
Yeah, we voted on it.
You shut down
So-
Hardin.
All
We
right,
can vote to re-evaluate it.
so I vote to close the meeting.
Alright, second.
I'll
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Everybody. There's no one else online. Thank